investors, how to get the best stem cell companies for all the investors who've had exits in the healthcare space to look at your stem cell investments. Figuring that out strategically can be one of the best uses of time I've found, because if you're not resourceful like this, like we talked about earlier, then you're at a disadvantage against the firms that don't try to be as thoughtful or strategic. They have so many resources, so many people on the team, and they get so many referrals. They don't need to find new ways to inject in new investor leads. So to help make this more practical, we're going to fill out a little worksheet in a minute. But before we do, does anybody have a question about these last couple slides I can answer? Yes.
That was a question, but a comment. You were talking in the earlier slides about locking up a position with a trade organization. That works because I didn't think of the trade organization, but there's a niche that I'm working with, and there's a blog, and they're like the blog that very much is only on that particular niche. So I talked to the founder of the blog and said, look, what does it take for me to become your #1 listing? Well, I'll give you $800 in Canada. And so it was something as simple as that, and now I'm going to be listed every month in there. The item that we're selling every month, every product, and now we're his founding member of this blog, and he's up to 25,000 views, a week now. So it can be something as simple as that you never know. All of a sudden, we've gotten 15 or 20 leads off it in the last month.
That's awesome. Yeah. So the example was negotiating with the #1 blog in a niche area, and for $800, he was able to have a #1 position on the website, and they get 25,000 views a week, and he's got a dozen clients or a dozen new customers just this last month off of that one deal alone. So that's a great example, practical example. Yes?
When you say lock up these choke points, do you have sample contracts, written contracts that you've used in order to?
Sure. So the question is, when you lock up these choke points, do you have sample contracts? No, because in some cases it's just literally buying the domain name and then actually providing a lot of genuine content on it. So you not only have the most helpful website, but you got the Fifth Avenue real estate of capitalraising.com or whatever your niche is, like stemcells.com or whatever. So you wouldn't need a contract for some of these strategies. I think it'd be probably risky legally for us to provide a legal contract template, but if you have an area where you're not sure how to approach them, and for any idea when you leave the workshop today, if you're not sure how to apply an idea, then shoot us an email and say, hey, I've got these 3 things. I'm really stuck on how to apply this idea. And we've helped do that hundreds of times. So we could help you if you're feeling bottlenecked by something that's like a legal path or just a negotiation path. We can maybe help, in figuring that out. Yes?
Can you talk about your point number 3 on insurance? Can you describe that?
Yes. That one is basically similar to, that is the title insurance example. That's why it seems so similar. That is that exact one. But another good example that's relevant is #1. There is a billionaire in New York, which, by the way, he wasn't familiar with the family office concept, and he lives in New York, and he's worth over $1 billion. So that shows you how new the industry is. But he was able to grow his wealth at that level because in his space, he had trained and gathered together 80 different brokers and sources of business that would refer deals to him. And he was able to take those deals and monetize them. And in his industry, he's kind of private, so I don't want to say what exact industry it's in, but basically by originating the deals, he's able to monetize those readily, and it's a game of who can originate the most deals in the space for the game that he's playing, investment-wise. And so he's been able to have a choke point in that he has more referral agents than anybody else in his space. So he's been top of the league tables with his company and really kind of dominated his space. And so it wasn't getting one relationship that gave him 30 clients a day. It was one strategy of really going deep on having the best relationships with those who could refer the most business. So the way to relate that would be, if you're getting started, to find the top 8 trust and estate attorneys in your city, grow relationships with them, and hopefully 2 or 3 build a trusting relationship with you, or find the 4 business ownership clubs and groups of highly qualified members, and figure out how to be involved there and see if it's worth helping lead one of those. And figuring out what game you want to play so that you can be #1 at that very unique game that's giving you the unique value you're looking for. Is the point. Do we have one more question? Okay. So I want to make sure with each of these ideas that you go home with ways to build on it And so we have this exercise piece of paper on your table, actually. It's the one with the sandbox in it. Might also be in your workbook printed out full page. And the point here, this is a Jim Collins flywheel, which is like a 10,000 pound piece of metal, a wheel. And this is the sandbox that you're trying to dominate long term, and the keyword phrase that describes your sandbox. And Jim Collins talks about how if you have this huge piece of metal on a slight decline, the first rotation is very hard. Just to move it an inch or two and get it to start to rotate is almost impossible. But after it turns over once, twice, 10 times, it starts picking up speed. And eventually you don't even need to push it anymore. It's carrying its own weight down the hill. And even if you put a brick wall in between it and the sandbox that you're aiming towards, it would just crash through the brick wall and wouldn't even be slowed down because it has so much momentum. So that's the point of having all the focus and focusing on a sandbox position that's meaningful to your investor that you're targeting, is figuring out how do you get strategic momentum towards getting there. And that's why it's not 1, 2, 3, top to bottom, is you want to push down on the front of the wheel and get momentum. And that usually means what's the easiest, lowest cost, immediate choke point you could implement in the next 10 days that would start to get you momentum, or in the next quarter that would start to get you momentum. And then what's the second one, and what's the third one, so that you have a plan of what to put into place. And to make it practical, I filled it out for myself. I have getting version 3 done of the Centimillionaire Migraines book. We're going to put some more video content in here. We're then going to fix the centimillionaires.com opt-in and improve it and put more resources in there. And then the third part is that we've identified a firm in Los Angeles that has over 50 clients that are billionaires. They have several hundred clients that are centimillionaires, and their smallest client is 100 million plus net worth. And they're very private, so usually people appreciate speaking at the events or us helping them or mentioning their service in the book or something of that nature. But I don't know how to collaborate with them quite yet, so that's why it's number 3. And you might have something like that too, like a goal, and you're not sure how you're going to execute on it yet, and that's why you wouldn't put it number 1, so you can get that one done, get the next one done. It buys you time to figure out how you're going to get that second or third one done. And so why don't we take a couple minutes to fill out this slide real quick, so you go home with some action items here. And the very next slide after this is going to be a small group exercise. So let's not discuss with others at this point. Let's just write down some quick notes, and then we're going to have a coffee, water, small exercise group break in just about 2 or 3 minutes here after we jot this down. Just let me know if anyone has a quick question on this while you're doing it. It's 30 more seconds. We'll move on. All right. hopefully that helps make it practical, so you have some plans for moving forward. We have another exercise here we're going to be doing now, which is one of the foundational ones of the day, and that is to have a single sentence that describes in a crystal clear manner exactly what you do and why your target investor set would want to learn more or work with you. And this is something that is intuitive, but almost nobody has. Most people have a paragraph, or they can't say it in a single sentence, or when they say they have one, it's really a very long run-on sentence. And thousands of people are pitching these investors typically per year. So having that one line is really critical that cuts through all that clutter and gets their attention. There's so many uses for this, like leaving voicemails for somebody, meeting somebody over lunch and telling them what you do, writing an email, having it at the top of your one-pager, having it on your business card, having it on the front page of your pitch deck. So you don't have to go to page 5 to see what your firm does. Having it so that when you meet somebody at your office, you make sure and drive home with that crystal clear advantages that you have. And at our Super Summit, we had 1,200 people in December in Miami at that annual investor summit that we have. We have 75 speakers on stage over the 2 days, and most of them are investors. And one of the investor discussion panels was a one-liner like pitch evaluation session. So we showed one-liners up on the stage, and we had the investors hold up signs and rate the pitches, not whether they would want to invest in that deal, but just whether it made sense, whether it sounded unique, etc. It was pretty interesting because nobody, out of all of them, there's probably 15 we read, there was only 2 or 3 that everyone thought that sounded really good and they really got it dialed in and sounds unique and it's well said. A lot of them just say, we provide the best return at low risk, just kind of generic, we have no idea what you do. And a lot of people are saying they do that within their niche. So a lot of those fell flat. Some of them were overly complicated, but a lot of them it just wasn't clear what the person did and what the unique benefit was in the marketplace. But one also unique thing that came out of that is that that your investor avatar is who they should really be tested against. Because someone at one of our events, an investor on stage, might say that doesn't make sense to me, that maybe you're only raising capital from institutional investors, or maybe you're only raising capital from medical device experts for your stem cell proprietary protein solution. So you don't need the average family office to understand it. You need your investor avatar to understand it. So that's important to remember. And the more high level, the more sophisticated, the more in tune with deal flow, the more connected the investor is, the more critical it is to do this. So you can ignore all 93 slides today and still raise capital. You might raise hundreds of millions of dollars and do nothing that we talk about. But a lot of us find it challenging, find it hard, very competitive, so we need all these little advantages. When you get beyond friends and family and you have to cut through clutter to get engagement, to get face-to-face, a lot of us do well once you do get face-to-face. You need something like this, because otherwise you're just like, somebody left me a voicemail yesterday that says, hey, it's John, give me a call back, here's my number. Yeah, I can't call him back. I don't even know who on my team should call him back, so I don't know what he does, and he wasn't able to say so in 20 seconds. We have people at our events all the time, investors who say you have 15 seconds to get across your idea on a high level, or I'm just not going to read the rest of the email, or I'm not even going to listen to the second half of your voicemail because they're so busy trying to get through their day. So I think as you move up the investor sophistication curve, everybody wants to know that they're making a good investment of their time. And many times I ask people, what's your one sentence? They say, oh yeah, I get this, that's easy, yeah, we know that. But I ask them then what it is, and they'll go on and say, well, sometimes we do this, and other times we do that, and then we have this unique risk model that does this, and it'll take a long time to explain it. And there's a saying in the communication world that, I'm sorry that my message was so long, I didn't take enough time to write something short. In other words, I'm sorry that I had to write you an essay about what we're doing. I didn't take time to get to know myself, the industry, who you are, to actually boil it down to a sentence on why you should care that I'm emailing you right now and why you should meet with me. So it's a thoughtful, intentional thing to actually be able to describe it and articulate what you're doing in a clean way. And this sentence changes the words you can use and what the investor cares about changes based on your investor avatar. This changes based on your sandbox and your niche within a niche. And I found that you can never create a good one on the first pass. That's not what we're trying to do here today. We're trying to get started on a draft or 2, because it takes 20 or 30 versions, showing it to someone on your team, doing another 5 versions. And some shortcuts to figuring it out is that if your strength is in an area, then you should use the hard numbers to show that strength and hopefully say things others can't say. If you've invested in the senior living space for 32 years, then you should use 32 years focused on senior living investing, and then add what makes you compelling and unique in a way or two, so that you have a real tangible number in there that others can't copy. They might say they're very experienced or a world-class team, but that means nothing. Anybody can say that, and it's not tangible. That's the power of having the real numbers in there that can be verified, that can be backed up, that others cannot say. So that's a shortcut. Figuring out why you started your firm, what makes people invest, what brings them back, why you get referrals. Those elements, could be in here in the one-liner. That's important to think about. Many times there's a word that has to be in there somewhere because it's descriptive, it's appealing. You might have 2 or 3 words that have to be in here. You're not sure where yet, so it might be a clunky, long sentence to begin with, and you can refine it down to something shorter. And then the other thing to remember is that you could have an unoptimized brand name like Wilson Capital, and maybe it doesn't hurt you, but it doesn't help you either. And then you can have a name that helps you. Those are the three layers. It's hurting you, it's driving away business, it's neutral, like Wilson Capital. I have no idea what you do, unless I've known you forever and would invest under any name. It doesn't help me that you have that name. Or it's a name that actually describes what you do and why you should invest with you. And the thing to remember is that if you can optimize the brand, it will sweat for you every day, just like this one-liner. It'll work for you in the marketplace. You don't have to have one. Almost everyone has a meaningless name with some Greek god or something that doesn't relate to what they're doing. And they raise more capital, but it helps you raise it just a little bit faster and be more memorable. And if your brand name is meaningless, then your one-liner has to carry all the weight to bring it home. But if your brand name at least says what you do, or what you do, and why you might be a good one to work with, all in the brand name, then your one-liner can really just drive home the compelling details. But otherwise, your one-liner has to say what you do and why to work with you, and then you have to squeeze in something tangible that makes you credible, and it becomes much harder. So an example is we grew our events. We realized direct investments was a big trend. We thought, well, some of these direct investment events pertain to private equity a bit more, some real estate focus. Maybe we should do Wilson conferences and not just Family Office Club. As soon as we did, we had a harder time getting people to come to the events, even though it was the same events, the same investors, etc. It was Wilson conferences, not Family Office, what we do, and club, which basically is meaning there's a community and membership. Family offices are coming and registering to network with, etc. And so that's an example of it in our business. So this is so important. I want to make sure that you don't leave today with a draft of this and don't have momentum on getting it figured out. And I found that those 25 minutes on the airplane where your cell phone doesn't work, you can't be on your laptop, is like a great time to be running down 20 versions of this, 30 versions of this, and get the next one evolved for a business partner or something. And so let's just work on a couple versions of it. And it is 1:43 right now. And this is one of the more important exercises to get going. So we're just going to take 10 minutes to do this. Introduce yourself to someone you did not come here with today, someone you have not done an exercise with yet, you didn't sit next to during lunch. Let them know who you are, and then tell them what you do within a single sentence. And then just admit if you realize that was 3 sentences, you need to work on it. But if the person's acting like they just said a one-liner and they spoke for 5 minutes, then maybe help them and refine it, or everyone here has homework to do though. Everybody's one-liner can be made better and more articulate typically. So it's 1:43. We'll come back to 1:53, and when you hear the bell ringing, please help quiet down the tables for us so we can get going again. Everybody, quiet down. I think we can start again the workshops. Thank you. So I hope many of you have a start on what your one-liner is going to be for your business, and I hope you'll continue to work on it. I've tried and created probably 20 or 30 different one-liners for clients and myself, and I've never been able to create one of these in less than 20 versions. It always needs multiple days of thinking and iteration and consideration on what words to use and what words not to use. And one thing to think about is for your investor avatar, which words are going to confuse them versus not. One consistent thing is using a word that really your core investors that you're going after, they're not familiar with that word until after they meet with you. Or if everybody is saying the same thing, you for sure don't want to say what everybody is saying, and you don't want to say something that anyone could say. Like, we provide great returns with low risk. And people said that at the Super Summit, even when they knew it was going on the slide in front of hundreds of people, they said that was a clear one-liner that got them into meetings and such. And I think there's a better way, and that was the point of that exercise.
You got slammed.
Yeah, a little bit, nicely, hopefully, but it's like in a helpful way. I'd rather find out from feedback than investors not telling you, being too polite and just ignore your email. That takes a while to sometimes try to figure out. So that last section there is on positioning, which is more fun. This next section on architecting is kind of the homework to get the positioning part done. So the positioning section, is what sandbox do you want to dominate. The architecture is how you're going to dominate that sandbox. How are you going to own that turf and defend it? And what I found is that this is the part that everyone has an excuse not to do. There's three big excuses that come up. People say they don't have time, but really you don't have time not to do this because we're all time constrained, and this is a more effective way of raising capital. For every hour you invest, you're going to get more out of it over the medium term, over the long term. If you need to close a deal by tomorrow at 4 p.m., then you can, just ignore most of the stuff we're teaching you here today, because this is a lot about making progress over 2 months, over 4 months, and making momentum with generating genuine relationships with investors. If you need a deal done by tomorrow, it has to be with someone you already know and is way up this trust curve already. So this is about long-term and medium-term unfair advantage in the marketplace. And not having time is not an excuse, because you can do everything we're talking about here in 30 minutes a week, or you can speed it up and do 30 minutes a day, but just half of your lunchtime on Fridays, you can execute everything we talk about in this section, and you'd have it done within 9 months to a year and a half. You'd have all of it in place and have a significant advantage. The other excuse is that you're not a good writer or you're not a speaker, and that's not the natural thing for you, but almost nobody in here is a natural writer or a natural speaker, and it's not their strength. And so that same excuse is used by everybody not to do what we're talking about in this section. You just have to move past it. I'm a horrible writer, and I've written 13 books. So if I can do it, then you can do it. And I've got people that edit everything I write. The team reviews it. My books get edited multiple times. And my TA at Harvard looked at my final paper, and it was just full of red ink, and she was from the Czech Republic. And her first language was, or her first question was, is English your first language? And, it wasn't her first language. She still destroyed me with the red ink. And I still put out the books, and my competition still does not. So I really encourage you just to, grow in one of the areas, and then that can build momentum and growing in the other areas. And if you never want to speak publicly anywhere, you never want to write a single thing, then we'll talk about how you can do that too. You just need to do one of them to get your ideas out of your brain so people know what expertise you have. Otherwise, they won't know that you have this value that you can provide to them. The other excuse is everyone says they're not allowed to do something because of regulatory and compliance concerns, or their partner wouldn't let them, it's not their style. But everyone has those same regulations in your jurisdiction. And all of you have competition that's on CNBC, that gets interviewed on podcasts, that publish materials, that have white papers that are released. So I would look at what the competition's doing and figure out how they navigated that. If your compliance attorney says no to everything, they might just want to have their job be easy so they don't have to use their brain. I'd fire them and get a different compliance attorney who's goes by the law, always above board, but can work with you on doing some things that help you in the marketplace. And then also, in some of our spaces that are very heavily regulated, sometimes it helps to have an educational company, a consulting division, an operating business, or a separate LLC business line that would allow you to speak more publicly and give away information more. And perhaps in the byline, you can say a little bit about your firm name or just what you do, and that you've been an investor in stem cells for the past 12 years. But it's a different division and not your investment firm that's publishing all this information. That's another response, because we've gotten those objections for the past decade on this section of why people can't do it. But the good news is, because almost nobody does, it's why it continues to work. We're going to see if, yes?
If you were saying that you want to defend against the easy entry,
yes.
How do you do that? Is that your IP protection? Or?
The question is, how do you defend against others coming into your sandbox, and how do you do that? The next 15 slides are going to be answering your question. But I want it to be really clear when we get to the end of this section. So if something doesn't make sense along the way on one of the slides, please raise your hand. When we get to the end of the section, maybe we can make sure that you're seeing, how exactly we can do it. We want to do a quick survey here. If you get out your phone and go to menti.com, it's menti.com. It's a letter M is in mom, M-E-N is in Nancy, T-I.com, and it's and you put in the code 594206. Then as long as the internet stays connected here, it's going to update this with how much capital you raised last year. And we'll be able to see from who's in the room today. It's different at every workshop, of course, what the level of experience is. seconds to type that in, and we'll do one more question. So you can see here that just about 60% have raised 0 to 5 million. You know, a good 40% have raised less than $1 million in the last year. And then it looks like a good close to 30% have raised 10 to 25 million just last year, which is pretty big. At some of our workshops, the numbers skew more to people who are a little bit earlier in capital raising, which means networking during the cocktail hour. You can really interact with some people who have, if you're raising, you know, 0 to 1 million last year, very likely during cocktails, you're going to be talking to someone who raised 10 million, 20 million or more last year. So hopefully you find that helpful. Okay, the second question. What level of thought leadership are you producing? No thought leadership, a little bit of articles and interviews, consistent webinars, reports, and interviews, or you regularly speak and you have great thought leadership positioning. All right, so we've got close to 50 people that have answered, and it looks like about 85, 87% of everyone who answered, you know thought leadership, or you've just written some articles or gotten a little bit of exposure out there. So this proves my point of that most people don't do this architecture stage, usually for those 3 reasons I stated, or simply their partner doesn't allow it, their company doesn't allow it, it's just like not allowed as a policy. But usually it's not allowed as a policy because of one of those 3 reasons that I mentioned earlier. I think it's just important to point out because it's the very fact that nobody does this is why the value exists. Like the cereal aisle, the more the people do something, the harder it is to compete and stand out. And as industries mature and get full of more competitors, just like when you release information on how to start a family office and webinars and white papers, the person who does gains exposure in that turf, in that sandbox area. So if you want to expedite the inevitability that someone with your similar experience as yourself, with a similar investment offering is going to do the work that we talked about in this section, and it could be you or it could be someone else similar to you, then you know it's an inevitability that someone's going to do it over time because of the way that the internet, social media, Amazon, Google operates. All these niches get filled with information, and the person who arbitrages a new industry or an inefficiency of access to what is a single family office or what is a virtual family office, or I just had a liquidity event for $200 million. What should I do now? If you solve and arbitrage that gap of people not being able to find genuinely helpful resources, then you're going to have the advantage. Evan Pagan talks about moving the free line. If everybody in your space is giving away a little bit of information on their website and you're giving away an extra webinar or a white paper or a benchmark study, you're now giving away more for free. If your competition has workshops, and that's how they get some of their investors, where they charge money for the workshop, and it's in a hard-to-go-to destination once a year, and you're doing regional workshops, and you charge less or you charge nothing just to build a relationship because you know that the audience is so qualified you're reaching out to, that would be moving the free line to get more people to come towards you. This is what the sandbox looks like. You just write down on an exercise sheet, oh, this is our sandbox. And the only walls around it could just be the relationship and the Rolodex that you have with counterparties and your knowledge of the space. But really, anyone could wander over and just step inside your sandbox, and now you have a competitor, a 3rd competitor, a 5th competitor, you know, or maybe 50 or 60 competitors. In reality, what you really want to have happen is look at whether you really want to be in the sandbox and then how you can build the tallest walls around it possible. And a good litmus test is when you choose the keyword term that you want to dominate over time, is this valuable enough turf that you'd be willing to spend the next 10 years, the next 20 years kind of dominating that space? And if you feel like you're uncomfortable making that commitment that, you know, if this doesn't work within 6 months, I'm out, if you're not really willing to take that 5, 7, 10 year plus view, then maybe you don't have the right sandbox. It should be so valuable a turf to own that if you could ever get there, a whole lot of great things would happen. That was my mindset creating the Family Office Club and then the How to Start a Family Office niche. And right now with the Six Millionaire niche, there's 40,000 people globally who are worth over $100 million. I just want to work with 100 of them. So no matter how long it takes to build up that centimillionaire positioning, I'm pretty sure good stuff's going to happen if I can execute on it. Yes.
I wanted to just go back to what you were saying, so I just want to be clear, are you saying that giving away the free and being over more is better?
Yes.
Or than putting up and doing one or two?
Yeah, the more.
Singular select ones?
Yes, I mean, the only reason you want to make it selective and few is if the audience, the number of prospects were so few, and that by making it more scarce, it would be perceived as more valuable perhaps, but in general, the more you can have it just be the access to the thought leadership, the value, just getting genuine value before spending $1 or having to meet with you in person, the better. So one way might be to keep it all internal and you only share information with somebody who meets with you face to face, while somebody else does one podcast interview a month that gets listened to a couple thousand times each, where they're just giving away their expertise. Because lots of clients, they want to work with someone who is the leader and the top expert in the field, and they'll want help with implementation rather than going and doing it themselves. You know, a podcast interview is not going to allow someone to know everything that you've figured out over the past several decades. Yes, another question?
Yeah, my question is there, how do you know, what, keywords, you should really go after,
Sure, yeah, that's a good question. How do you know what keywords to go after? It has to be related to the Venn diagram of your background, where you make a lot of money, where you're passionate about it. Also, hopefully it's on trend with something that's a rising tide, and it's going to be an inevitability of a large opportunity that's coming down the way. Also, hopefully something very closely related to what you're doing now, what you have been doing, where you just feel very high conviction that you can pull that off, and that it's practical to do it. And then we've used a Google keyword tool, and you can see how many people are searching for different things. So you can see that 170 people search each month for how to invest in self-storage, or stem cell investing, or MLP investment funds, or something of that nature. Like 40 a month search for how to start a family office. You know, if we just capture 4 of those, and then one of them engages with us, then we could build a big business that's a high value niche. We don't need a huge stream of people looking for it. So it's a combination of all those things, but also the first step on analyzing all your competition and finding the gap, and analyzing the investor base, targeting the right investor, getting to know them to see where their pain points are and why they're not being served right, and combining that with what you know about yourself. I think it's the intersection of all of that. Yeah, that's a good question, because it's very tough, and it's better to meditate on it until you're so high conviction that you know you've got it mostly right and then pretty well dialed in, and then start taking a lot of action, because otherwise it won't be very motivating to do any other work, because you'll be kind of unsure. You have like an unsteady ground. Good. Yes.
Going back to the comment with the question about do you give away for free? A good example, if you go back a few years to the Learning Annex, because I know the people started Learning Annex. The whole idea was that you'd have people who would get up and talk about a subject, no matter how obscure the subject was, that somebody was willing to pay $10 to go to that. And and by having a lot of people in a room, somebody's going to come back to that person. Well, you must know what you're talking about. Will you help me? And that was always the key. I got my investment counselor that way. After 30 years, he's still my investment counselor from the Learning Annex. So people do it a long time ago. It's just now much easier to do because you got the internet to do it.
Right. So the example was the Learning Annex. So just have people speak, and then you just pay $10 to come listen to an expert speak on a niche topic. It could be even an obscure topic. So they get a lot of people in the room, and a percentage of those people are going to raise their hand and say, I want more hands-on help. And has found his investment counselor he's had for a decade now through a Learning Annex. 30 years through a Learning Annex event. The same as with the books. We make $0 off the books, and it's like a $3 piece of information that's like a speech bundled in a book format. And we're not making money off the book. It's just giving away the value to de-risk their investment of time and engaging. You had a question as well?
I was going to say that this has been a journey. 25 years ago, I was in a room where there was a discussion on whether we should take our consulting practice and write a book about it and make it available. And it was like, well, if you write it, then no one's going to come to us for the consulting practice. Right. And in reality, we developed a rather large consulting practice around, and it became the #1 business book. So.
Awesome. So the example is writing a business book for the consulting practice, and they were afraid of letting their secrets out, but then by writing the book, they were able to grow a huge consulting practice. And it's similar to when people used to actually buy CDs. They didn't release the worst song from the Aerosmith CD so that nobody would buy the CD. They would release the best one. So when you bought the CD, you found out it was the only good song on the CD. You sell those CDs. You want to give people away your best stuff. If you hold it tight, no one knows you're the expert. And then the competition is going to give away a higher quality idea, and they're going to say, "Oh, this other stuff fell flat." We had $240 million auto parts family just emailing with yesterday that's getting started. And they found this book after attending a $20,000 workshop in Chicago, and it said all the stuff from the $20,000 workshop was in your book for $3. So they flew down to Key Biscayne and spent a day and a half with us because we were giving away more. So they realized there's a deeper level that he'd be providing if that's what he gives away in the book. So it definitely works. Most importantly, because nobody wants to do a lot of this stuff, is that ultra wealthy families and private families, they don't respond to cold calls or cold emails typically. The only good use of an investor database is to try to meet in person with somebody. It's not to send an email out, help a percentage respond, and then somehow you convert them. It's really engaging and creating real relationships. And what I found is that a lot of my most valuable relationships come from the podcast or the book, from the event, or from familyoffices.com, and they see that, and then they just reach out cold. And I wouldn't have ever met them if I had reached out to them. They wouldn't have responded. But because they reached out to me, then we can start potentially working together. And that's really critical to get that. And I think that what's counterintuitive is the shortcut way is, well, Richard, just give me the 15 investors that want opportunity zones right now. It's like, well, I'm waving the how to start a family office flag and the family office club flag. I'm not waving the opportunity zone flag or stem cell flag or insurance company one. So the room isn't getting filtered by those screens. It's getting filtered by, you want to start a family office, are interested in the family office club platform. So I can't do your push-ups for you. You have to do your own push-ups, position yourself, figure it out, get market feedback, and be known as the top expert on that space. So giving you 10 pieces of fish is not nearly as valuable as teaching you how to build a net and a harpoon. And hopefully you're, it's pretty violent examples of attracting investors, but hopefully you're just doing it in such a genuine way that each piece is just adding so much value that people want to work with you. And I think that teaching the workshop adds so much more value than saying, oh, well, let me screen my database and do Control F in Excel and think about who's in my email inbox and introduce you to 7 people. At most, maybe you convert 1 or 2 over a period of time, where I can help you get 1 or 2 cold calls from investors who are qualified coming in every week or every month. And for me, that's such a higher level of value, and it's more scalable across the membership. So that's why we focus on what we do. So this is what we want to create. When someone looks at your sandbox, they shouldn't see this, they should see this. So they don't want to come in and compete directly with you. You want to make them switch to a different niche and not be trying to own the same keyword phrase as you. If you do a good job, people will want to copycat you and come into the same area. And you want to make it so if they do, they find it painful and they change, or they just don't in the first place, ideally. So a lot of being effective at attracting investors, I've found, is a combination of these 3 things. Like I said, you don't have to do all 3. It's just how to be most effective. And it is the reaching out. We'll talk about this in the execution stage today. Writing and speaking. And the writing could just be interviewing people via email. It could be writing blog posts. It could be articles. It could be white papers. It could be an analysis of something that is going to stay true long term. You don't really want to speak or write on anything that is about interest rates or what China did yesterday or what Trump said on Twitter, because no one's going to care in a year and a half. And hedge fund managers fall into this trap a lot. All they talk about is their performance this quarter and interest rates. You want to talk about things that are evergreen. So you're putting down building blocks. They just build on each other over time. So if you talk about how you analyze a security or how you analyze risk in a portfolio, it might get tweaked over a few years. It's going to be very much the same long term, because that's your mindset on evaluating risk. And you'll get momentum over competition, because almost no one produces these bottom 2. And those who do, at least half of them, are not doing it in an evergreen fashion, where you can build on that content year after year after year. And if you do that, then you're going to have a marked advantage. So when we talk about having an unfair advantage at the start of the day, if you combine having the investor avatar with your niche sandbox, with a crystal clear 1 sentence, and you just do this on a very light, low level that you're comfortable with, that's going to be an unfair advantage in the marketplace. This is really what it looks like in terms of how investor leads will find you and flow through and eventually invest with you or meet with you. This is how we do it. And at the Influence Workshop, I'm going to get some email examples just in the last 10 days or 2 weeks of just cold emails we've got from people asking us to help them start their family office, or they just sold their business and need help. to make it all real, that it works for sure. And as a reminder, we've put about $3 million into Google AdWords, LinkedIn, Facebook, advertising, marketing. So it's produced somewhere between 15 and 20 million from that, and it's by following this model. So that's the delta between it. And at the top is articles, blog posts, maybe a podcast interview. And as we go down different layers, each layer involves more time on your part to create, but also more commitment on the potential investor's part to consume. So anyone who participates in that layer of the funnel is more likely to convert because of their investment of time, which inherently means that they trust you and they're respecting the value that you're giving them within the advice. So at the top, you might have 5,000 people a year, and they might listen to a podcast or read a short article or watch a 2-minute YouTube video that you created. Next might be a special report or a white paper, benchmark survey. It might take you half a day or 2 days to create at most. It might take someone 20, 30 minutes to consume, or at least 15 minutes, or an article might be 4 minutes or less. So on both levels, it takes more commitment. And you might have 5,000 people a year here, maybe 2,000 people a year at this level. Books or speeches given, again, it might take an hour of their time, it might take 3-4 hours of their time, or a whole day. At that level, it's a much higher commitment. So they're much more qualified to actually make it through the book, make it through the talk, etc. And that helps you get meetings if they have already trusted you at this level, investing their time. So importantly, someone could just read or hear you on a podcast and reach out and want to meet, and they might invest. Someone might read your book and like it so much, even though they're located somewhere else, they might do a video call and then invest. And we've had that happen before. Someone might experience this layer of your funnel, then this layer, this layer, this layer, and do it in order. And they might stay within this funnel for 1, 2, 5 years or longer, and then they might meet and invest. And they could start at any point and jump to the other ones. You might read the book first, and then read your white paper, etc. So the point is that you could survive with none of this and just raise capital the old-fashioned way. You can survive by just doing podcasts, and we've got someone at Capital Con that talks about that. You can do it by just doing books, or just one piece of all this. It'll probably be stronger than doing none of it. But when you have all of it, when you have one piece of it, it's easier to get the next. So some blog posts and articles can be copy-pasted into a white paper. If you have 6, 7 white papers, those could be chapters of a book. Once you've articulated yourself on a podcast 10 different times, it's much easier to come up with content written-wise. For this book, all I did was give a speech on it 3 times. I spoke in Monterrey, Mexico, to some family business owners that were really large businesses. And then I spoke in Chicago on it. I spoke at the Super Summit. I transcribed it from the Super Summit, uploaded it to rev.com. It got transcribed the same day for $1 per minute. And I just spent 2 business days organizing it into the chapters of the book with diagrams and models and examples and case studies. And then we had the book done. It just took 2 business days of my time, plus the speeches I gave, and I was thoughtful about the topic, etc. But it wasn't like this was a 9-month project of pain and suffering to get done. But it's taken me 13 trials to figure out that process. So now you can just kind of skip those 13 experiments and just do it that way and just have things transcribed. And what's helpful is that you just realize these things build on each other. So you start with the easy things that are natural to you. Could be you don't like public speaking, so you just do podcasts in your office by yourself and do those. And you can just transcribe those and provide links via Dropbox or to your website where you can stream the MP3 or listen to it, etc. And just focus on the part that's easy that you can act on right away. The good news is that if all this fails on bringing in a single investor lead, if this all falls flat, said, oh, we did all this work and now, no one's coming to us cold. I thought people would be calling us. Then it's probably a positioning thing. Or in our execution stage, we're going to talk about how to access local investors and get local lead gen for investors. And you need to be pushing it through those strategies. But even if those all failed somehow, which they shouldn't if you have the right investor avatar, but even if all of those failed, then the very worst case is that every single meeting that you have for the next decade, you're able to walk in and put something down on the table that none of your competitors can, where you can add more value and you instantly have more authority and more credibility. Like walking into a hospital with a doctor's lab coat, people are more likely to be influenced by you because this is your lab coat. And they've scientifically proven that there's this very special type of authority which is most influential, and it's a credible authority. This helps build your credible authority positioning so that every meeting is more likely to turn into someone actually becoming a client. And I think that one byproduct is that when you produce content like this, you become a relative niche expert. Even if you started as one, you become even a deeper expert So you do genuinely add more value along the way, and you really enact a sense of reciprocation, like somebody opening a door for you to just help somebody at the cost of nothing. And as a thank you, they might refer you, they might keep you in mind, they might provide you a suggestion, or a productive resource of some type. One more point here, and then we're going to take questions if anybody has one. If you focus on the right sandbox, doing this for just 9 months or a year, you can really saturate a small niche area with a lot of information and be seen as being everywhere within a small space. And Jeffrey Gitomer is one of my mentors, and he said that if you give away value each week to someone who can say yes to you for your investment or your service, and you just do it every week in some very small way, that in just 1 or 2 years you'll be a local expert, in 3 or 4 years you'll be a regional expert, and in 5 to 7 years you'll be a global expert on that space. And I read that when I was really young. And he said in the book where he gave away that formula, he said, nobody's going to follow this because it's too much work. So I give it away, and all they want is the sales trick and what to say on the phone and how to convert people. They want the little shortcuts. But really, this is the way to really nail it long term. And when I read that, I didn't even know about the family office industry yet. But I said, well, I'm going to find a way to apply what he just said. And that's what I've been applying for the last 12 years in the Family Office Club. So it's a formula that each of you could be applying as well. Does anyone have questions about any part of this, or how to do it, or how to apply it to what you're doing? Yes, in the back.
Can you please repeat the formula?
Yeah, the formula was just every week to give away one small piece of content or value to a potential client who could say yes to you. So in Jeffrey Gitomer's case, he was a sales trainer, he's making $50,000 a year, and is able to follow this process to earn, he now has an 8-figure business and 10 best-selling books. And what he did was just start by accident. He was involved, he was asked to write an article for the Charlotte, North Carolina local newspaper on sales training, sales best practices. And he did that, and instead of cold calling people, he started getting people to call him. It'd just be one person a month, and then it'd be 2 people a month. And so he started writing a column for 2 newspapers, and he syndicated it to 3 newspapers, and started an email newsletter, and now it's just grown into a big business following a really simple formula. And I did the same thing. While writing, I started to get a random phone call or email, and I thought it was exciting that someone wanted to talk to me about the website that I had, giving away free information. And then as the calls increased, I realized that it was going to continue that way, and I needed to figure out what game I was going to play. By doing that, there would be a natural fit for me as we went from 1,000 hits a day, 3,000, 5,000, and it kind of naturally took off. Yes?
Is there any marked difference between working with a publisher and versus self-publishing? Obviously, you chose to
Right.
self-publish. Do you have any thoughts?
Right. The difference between working with a publisher and self-publishing is basically the amount of pain you want to endure. There's no benefit of working with a publisher. I've done it 3 times and just kind of regret it because they own your material. If you release the book, you want to update it the next year, they say, no, we don't want to come out with a new edition. If you want to buy copies of your own book, they usually charge you $30 a copy, or I can buy it for $3 a copy when I self-publish. I interviewed someone before who was an expert. He became a competitor. I can't take him out of the book. Now, if I have a new insight from today, I could add a paragraph here, upload the PDF to the Amazon site, and then everyone who buys my book tomorrow has that new case study. It's just way better to do it yourself, yeah.
The same question would be podcasts. I mean, where do you find the best venues for podcasts? Now, there's everybody in the world says, list your podcasts on our site. What are your thoughts on the best ways to do that?
Best way for podcasts to find where to post your podcast or to access to them. I just look at the top ranking podcasts, either in real estate or business or investments, and then figure out which ones would be the most relevant, and then just reach out and tell them what you'd like to speak about if they need a guest for their show. And if you have your own show, you might be able to trade exposure and say, I'd like to have you on our podcast, and if you think it makes sense, I'm happy to be on yours as well. Because most of them are looking for people to interview as well. Yeah. Yes.
Social media platforms, you talked about LinkedIn, Facebook, what's your thoughts on that?
In the execution stage, I have got 2 full slides on those, and they go pretty deep on that. But if we get through those 2 slides and still have questions, I'm happy to take them. Yes?
Your first couple of books was published by Wiley, right?
Yes.
Was that helpful at all as a new author?
No, I don't think so. I thought it was going to be for credibility, but what your client's going to care about more is the title being so valuable. You have that title really dialed in to who they are and what headaches they have. They don't care if it's by HarperCollins or Wiley or Amazon. And with my final book, they gave me a forward, like an advance on the book. They said, no, I don't want to do it. I said, okay, we'll pay you an advance to do it. I said, okay, but here's the deal. I don't think you guys help help sell any books last time. It was all me pushing it to my email list. So I'm not going to market this book, and we'll see how it does. And hardly any of them sold. So I got the book done. It was on the hedge fund industry. They wanted to put one out there, but they haven't really adapted to the times. I feel like so. They're really it's just a name stamped on there. I think they're going to go the way of Kmart, Kodak. Yes.
Can you give more examples of what to give value to a client that you could share?
Yeah, examples on how to give value to a
Yeah.
client. Yeah, for sure. I guess perfect example is the book you have on your table. We get more deal flow because of doing the capital raising workshops for our family offices. Having capitalraising.com and the Family Office Club platform is a choke point for getting new family office relationships and lots of deal flow for them. So that is a way to add value would be if I want someone to come to a capital raising workshop, to give away the capital raising book, say here's a 5-step system, here's a bunch of lessons I learned, and just give away the system. People still want to experience it in person and see how to apply it for themselves. But a better example for investors would be providing a video on family office governance or a video I recorded in Chicago at lunchtime during this workshop on the gap in the wealth management space of how almost no multifamily offices are helpful to families who want to do direct investments. I talk about why and how to solve that problem if you are recently liquid from an investment or from a company that you sold. And if someone listens to that and say, oh, that's why none of the wealth management firms that have been serving me feel like the right fit, or that's what's missing in the puzzle of how to manage my wealth now that I'm ultra wealthy, then they might lean forward and want to engage because they might think that I get it, for example. So we do a lot of short videos, emails, reports, etc. Like we did how the family office space is changing in Singapore. And it was like a special report, and we got 21,000 views on that. And we had a lot of new relationships came out of that, both from investment management firms and family offices that were based in Singapore. So that's one example. Yes.
Suppose somebody came before you,
Uh-huh.
and you are the second person in this field, how would you do?
If somebody came before me and I was the second person in the field, what would I do? One, I would make sure that I need to be exactly competing against them, and I couldn't tweak the sandbox to have a more valuable part of that sub part of the sandbox, or the part that's going to be growing more in the future. But if I was going to compete directly, spend a lot of time on the analysis part, see everything that they did and where the gap is, what they might be missing, and figure out who I would be targeting investor-wise. And even though you might have the exact same sandbox, it might be for a different investor avatar. And I would just make sure all the things that they're doing really well, that you are matching them on what's well, but then you have something unique from them in the marketplace. Your crystal clear one sentence should be decisively different, I think, than what they're doing. Any other questions? Yes?
Why did you find a dearth of talent on a multifamily platform for direct investment in real estate? That really surprised me.
Why do I find it like a lack of talent in the space?
Yeah.
It's not a lack of talent. I think it's actually too much talent. There's so many smart brains working on the space that it's very crowded. And we have tracked in the database, we've identified 476 multifamily independent sponsors just in the US. And we started tracking them about a year and a half ago. So I think it's just the number of them and the amount of times that they say, we buy garden variety, B class or C class, and we're value add multifamily independent sponsor that's moving things up by doing a 10 to 20,000 a door, renovation. I think there's so many people saying that, it's the opposite problem. There's just so many smart people doing it, but it's a huge market for investors too, right? It's not a niche area. A lot of private investors would be investing with you, for example, if they could get in a meeting with you and see what you're doing. There's a lot of supply on both sides, I guess.
Are you saying that the advisory component in there would be more a fund-to-funds advisor as opposed to a true direct investment advisor, or I'm not sure.
So the question is, are you saying it should be a fund-to-funds advisor versus direct? No, I think you could go either direction, but I think that my point is that if you do a superior job of saying something unique from the other multifamily sponsors, you figure out who's been saying yes to you, who you have natural access to as investors, and you get superior access to those local investor communities and business owner communities, and people that have liquidity events and all their advisors like trust and estate attorneys, CPAs. You get superior distribution to those individuals and who they trust to make investment decisions. that you can rise above the noise of lots of people saying that they're value add, multifamily, independent sponsors. And if you help them just, a lot of people, they know the word apartment building. Some investors have never heard of multifamily before. That's one thing I found, as simple as it sounds. Also, a lot of people just don't know who to trust. And so I think a lot of it is about providing education on how you add value and how the investment works, that they trust you. And I know some mortgage note individuals, they hold dinners and lunches and workshops, and it's through teaching how they do what they do that most people realize, wow, this goes pretty deep. I can't do it all. I want to trust you with my capital, and I want to do a test investment with you. And if it goes well, we'll invest again. So doing a workshop or a dinner could be a strategy. Like there's a multifamily group in Denver, and they do meetup groups. They do it 3 times a week. So they do 150 meetup group lunches a year, and they've risen, I don't know if it's $50 million or $75 million. They do 1 conference a year. Otherwise, it's just meetup lunches, very casual networking, where they get new private investors to come in all the time just through adding that piece of value. So that's my suggestion, is just to do things differently than a lot of others are doing in the space. Some people here in the room with very little competition, and some, like yourself, might have a lot of competitors out there. All right, we're going to try to start moving through a little bit faster for some of these slides, but feel free to keep asking questions as we go. I interviewed Brian Tracy. It's at familyoffices.com/audio3. And the number one suggestion he had in talking about everything he learned in his career related to capital raising or investments, and he's written 83 books, is that the title of what you put out into the world is most important. The title of the white paper, the article, title of the blog post, title of the podcast, that's going to determine who in the world gets filtered to actually consume the content. He said many times he's been hired and paid 6 figures to train an audience at a corporation, and they haven't even read his book, but they saw that he wrote the book that is best-selling in the niche. So it seemed very little risk and low risk to hire him to come in and have him train. They don't even know what he's going to teach exactly, but it's a shortcut, just like we talked about during the influence section. This slide is pretty straightforward, but it's just thinking about your materials and your investor meetings and your communications to make them as tangible as possible. The more you can show somebody, for example, our offices are right here. The more you can show someone your office space, whoops, it's moved on the island to be in a different space, but show them actual space and make it real. If you're in the oil and gas space, show them the oil well operating and the little device that you guys put in there to increase the efficiency of that oil well. And having a video recorded on site next to that instead of in a nice, pretty white studio that you spent thousands of dollars to construct, I think is much more credible and authentic. And then they see the real assets. They see that it's all real. I think investors want to de-risk that anything is not real or not serious or not tangible and not what you say it is. So the more times you can show that within a single conversation or deck, the more they feel at ease, because they don't have to de-risk that the whole thing is just digital or fabricated, or if your bio and your headshots and your deck have all different backgrounds on the team pictures, and one looks like a cut off arm from like a wedding picture, and one is a park in the background, one's a conference, they're going to think maybe you just met some friends on LinkedIn and put some pictures up there as their worst fear that they would never say out loud. They want to know that it's taken seriously, that they're real professionals on your team, and it's not just a loose connection. Because when investors are trusting an investment boutique, they know that you're early stage, they know you're not a big corporation, but they need to know like where that line is of what's real and what's official and formal and what's not yet. So figuring out what to make tangible and verifiable and making that as much as possible can really help. A lot of fund managers have trouble with this, especially hedge fund managers. They'll just be graphs and statistics and words throughout the whole presentation, and you don't even see who's on the team. You can't see pictures of them, so you don't know if they're 18 years old or a mid-career professional, etc. You don't know what their assets look like, the logos of the companies they've invested in, etc. Einstein, when he got the Nobel Prize, a journalist said, "Oh, you must be so proud that you discovered relativity." He said, "No, I didn't discover it. It's just the only thing I thought about for a decade." So when he was born, there was already scientists working on the theory of relativity. But he was able to solve it because he focused on it and nothing else for that long. And I really think that that's what's required to build ultimate level of conviction and trust with investors, is a focus, a long-term focus, and really digging in with high conviction on what you're doing and honing your craft over time. And I think that's how you build the most trust, because people know then that you wouldn't do X unless Y was true. You wouldn't do X unless you really were in the space a long time, or you couldn't possibly have talked 42 times on stem cells without knowing something about stem cells. Even in talk number 1, if all you were talking about was the very basics, going to a conference and talking about it would make a lot of connections for you. And by the 42nd talk, you would be a relative expert on some niche within stem cells. So there's things that just subconsciously, intuitively lead people to trust you. And one of those things is long-term focus on a single area. All right, so we had a question earlier about how to protect your sandbox, how to implement it. We're going to move on in just a second to the execution stage, and we have an exercise coming up. But does anyone have questions on any of these slides here that you're wanting to ask now before I move on? Okay. So in this section, we're going to talk about some things that you might have expected earlier on in the day or when you signed up to come here today. And there's 2 areas we're focused on here. It's taking action on steps 1, 2, 3, and taking action daily on what you're already doing to raise capital. But we're helping you do 2 things: be more effective and be more efficient. And some of these slides will help you do both with a single idea. And it's where you can buy yourself time. Dan Sullivan is one of my business coaches, and he talks about being as intentional as possible at everything that you do. So be intentional about what meetings you take, intentional about what you spend time on, intentional on where you go, where your business operates out of, what you invest in, and if you can maximize the intentionality and take it a layer farther than you already have, then you're going to be more productive and more effective. And one part of being intentional is intentional about your own allocation of time and where you get the most power for every hour that you invest, and you get the most ROI for the energy that you put out into the world. And if you can figure that out, what your unique ability is, what you're excellent at and passionate about, and maximize the amount of time you focus on that, you'll be able to raise more capital, get better deals done, etc. And it's a simple concept, but screening by it and constantly iterating, so a higher percentage of your time all the time is on that unique ability, is what's most important. And for me, it's really positioning is the unique ability. And positioning can be done for a single family office that wants to get more deal flow in healthcare. It could be for a single family office's operating business. One of my clients wants to buy, he just had a $200 million client who wants to buy a company that's doing 5, 10, 20 million in revenue, and then do some add-on investments and grow another company up to 100 million plus in revenue and sell it again. But this time he's going to have his son doing it, so he learns because he's kind of passing on to the second generation. And so while looking at that, my guidance to them is to figure out how to help them get positioned to get deal flow in that space, but also when they're looking to acquire a firm, how could they make some simple tweaks post-acquisition to boost the revenue in that company, because that's not their special ability. Their special ability is manufacturing of these products. And then also helping them go through what are choke points that they could acquire. So every time that they buy an add-on acquisition, that single choke point is helping boost the revenue on those subparts. So it's very relevant to the family office portfolio management direct investment space, but also it's relevant to running the family office club in general. It's relevant to helping those who are raising capital position themselves better. And each of you have a unique ability area where you have 20, 30, 50 different strategies that you can take based on your expertise. And maybe you buy hospitals, or maybe you're investing in consumer product companies, and you have different things that you do to negotiate, close the deal, find the deal, etc. For me, there's about 50 of them up here, such as choke point analysis, or using direct mail, or using Facebook, like geographical pin drops, or using LinkedIn, etc. And so when I come across a situation, there's a lot of different opportunities to apply ideas and help something get more momentum. And all of you have this list that's unique to you, and maximizing the amount of time you spend raising capital that's focused on your unique ability. It might even be that you need someone else to be doing some of the capital raising, because your unique ability is just going into the second meeting or the due diligence meeting, etc. One thing we found that can be helpful while out there raising capital and traveling to meetings and events, etc., is to record thought leadership that just documents your journey as you're going. Instead of being worried about having a beautiful video with perfect sound, getting more content out there that's genuinely helpful is better. So otherwise it's like worrying about what book publisher you put it under. Your audience cares a lot more about what the value is of the content. And I would just let your competition worry about making pretty videos that have perfect aspects to them, and they'll never create anything, just like most of them are not right now, because it just takes too much preparation, too much pre-thought, and it's more entertaining to watch a video at sunrise in Prague or at 12,000 feet in Zug or driving between meetings here in San Francisco than it is being in an office with a perfect white background, etc. And it feels more authentic. You can say, I just left this meeting, here's what I learned. I just left this 2-day conference at Hackathon, here's what everyone was talking about in Switzerland and how family offices are changing here just over the last year or two. And just providing those insights can help you be more effective, because it could be somebody asks a question and then you answer it, say, oh, I thought a video on this topic, or it can be part of an evergreen newsletter you drip, or something you follow up with after an investor meeting. We also put videos inside of white papers, articles, and books as well. We're going to be doing a full day workshop here in San Francisco on marketing materials, and we'll be going deep on every piece of material that you should have in place and how to optimize it in different ways. And there's a whole field of study. You can spend your whole life just studying in the field of writing copy, which means persuasive writing, or just getting people to take action based on your writing. And there's ways to optimize your writing. We talked about the most important one already, which is having a crystal clear one-liner, because the headline is the most important thing. The title, the subject, the email, the top of the one-pager, the first page of the pitch deck. Because if they don't get past that, they're not going to read anything else. And if you really just focus on nailing that, if you've never studied this area or thought about it before, if you nail that, you'll be head and shoulders above what a lot of your competition is sitting out there. Yes?
Could you give an example of the shock and awe package?
Sure. Yeah, so the question is shock and awe package. Can you give an example of it? So that's a term used in copywriting for when you want to make a really good first impression with a prospect, maybe after a quick shaking of hands at a meeting, or then you sat next to him in first class on the airplane, you wanted to follow up or something of that nature. You might want to direct mail. Everyone gets hundreds of emails, but usually we don't get anything valuable via direct mail. And so sending over some materials that just add pure, genuine value to them versus trying to sell them. And it kind of makes them really see instantly the difference between you and a lot of the other investment firms they've interacted with is kind of the purpose of it. So a good example of it would be after meeting with the family office, I might have a letter that encourages them to go and take my online quiz, which is free, but it analyzes their family office for them and gives them the results so they can see where they need to work on developing their family office more. That might be in a letter. And then I might have my business card paper clip to that and have the Centimillionaire Migraines book and maybe the SFO book if they ask for it. And then if there's something really specific to a pain point they had, I might include that too. That would be like a shock and awe package, is what people refer to. Yeah, and having that so it's just ready to go. So you meet someone and your assistant can just send it out just with a customized cover letter is the best thing to do. So you always have 5 or 10 of them kind of prepped to go. Is there another question for you? We're going to talk about automating relationship management, but just an example, because we talked about copywriting at the workshop, is that they found that people are 30% more likely to open an email if you use their first name, and 20% more likely if you use their first and last name. And that's just one example of how one little tweak can make it so that a higher percentage of people open the email, which hopefully means a higher percentage will be calling you back, emailing you back, etc. So that just shows how little things can make a big difference in the results you're getting. And like I said, March 14th, we'll be having that workshop here locally. And John Carlton and Dan Kennedy, Frank Kern, David Ogilvy, to some degree, all talk about copywriting. There's books you can read on this that would be helpful if anyone wants to go deep right now. Yes, in the back.
Could you repeat the point you say 20% more likely first name?
Yeah, 30% more likely if you use their first name in the subject line of the email, and 20% more likely if you use their first and last name. They're more likely to open the email. I brought this up earlier today, so I don't really need to talk about it much. Just that my team, Andres and then Luis and Maria, work on helping clients take their positioning, and if they know their positioning or they need to work on that part of it, we'll take that and create their whole suite of investor relations materials. Because we have members that were paying $30,000 for a website, or $5,000 for a pitch deck, or $2,000 for a logo, and they would say they would go to this firm and it would be one piece of this wheel done, not at all done, and then it was being done by people who are skilled at making it look pretty, but they didn't know anything about capital raising, investor avatars, positioning to attract a certain type of investor. So I help with the one-liner, logo, positioning, investor avatar part, and I step out of the way, and my design team knocks out the rest of the pitch package, which is a one-pager, website, logo, pitch deck, etc. So we've got, we started this in Q4, kind of beta tested it. We have 15 clients now, and they're doing their pitch packages, and something that we will continue to be doing. So we have one resource, which is the capital raising audit, free. You just log into the membership area, submit all your materials that you're showing investors, and you can describe your biggest challenge if you want there. And then on the 15th of every month, I download those, and I do the analyses myself. You get a 4 to 6 page analysis of what I would consider changing, or just things to think about. It'll have to do with positioning, investor avatar, thought leadership, implementing everything we talked about here at the workshop. So it's one-on-one feedback on how to use this advice today. That's completely free. If you actually want it implemented for you and want on the phone one-on-one advice or meeting in person to go over it, then that is what Pitch Package is, and that's what pitchdex.com talks about. So that's the difference between them.
So now,
Yes.
so this program, this creating this pitch package, so that's available to any of us to purchase from you, or how does that work?
Yeah, it's on pitchdex.com. There's 3 packages, and it includes an annual membership as part of the package, just to be bundled in there. And when you sign up, there's a survey you complete, and when you have the survey done, you get on the phone or meet in person. And from that point, as long as the survey is complete, it's like 4 to 6 weeks, and we can knock out the complete pitch package for someone. Sometimes website can take 3 months dealing with a third-party company. Yeah, I think we have one more question in the back. No? Okay. All right, so we're going to talk about, yes, go ahead.
So when somebody answers our questions on the website, help us to design the website, right?
Yes.
How do we know they are qualified as you are?
Yeah, how do you know that the person answering your questions on our team are as qualified as I am? Well, the team's doing their unique abilities. Like Maria on my team is a corporate design person that just came from a publicly traded company doing branding design for them, all their branding guidelines, etc. So printed materials and graphic design is her skill set, far better than me. So she's more qualified than me for the part she does. But she wouldn't work with you on the investor avatar. She would listen in on that call, so she knows the theme behind what we're trying to do. And importantly, Louise knows a lot more about designing websites and technical API and technology plugins than I ever will. So they're better at being more qualified than me for the parts they should be doing. And it should be true for everyone here in the room. Those people on your team are not only as qualified, hopefully they're much more qualified on the thing they're doing. Like your accountant should be able to run circles around you within whatever accounting software you use, you would hope, right? So that's the same on our team. They don't do the part I do, and I don't do the part they do, because we wouldn't be capable of doing it. The question, yeah, so thank you for asking that. Yes?
Did you say that's pitchdeck.com?
Pitchdex.
Or Dex with an S?
Plural.
Yes.
You should maybe put the URL.
Yeah, that would be good. We just had it on our familyoffices.com website. We just bought pitchdex.com in Q4. And I guess it's a good example of a choke point is that we just saw that there was all these searches on Google were going to pitch decks. That people weren't calling it pitch book. They weren't calling it pitch presentation. They were calling it pitch decks. So for $10,000, we bought pitchdex.com. We said, well, we'll just get that to make it easier. But I should use it here to actually take advantage of that spend, obviously. So thank you for that. So we're talking about execution. And one thing I found, you might have experienced this already, is that a lot of investment partnerships fall apart over frustration of capital not getting raised. People thought that you were brought in because you were the rainmaker, you had this Rolodex, you had some experience, and then it's harder than you thought. The market's harder. It's harder to get investors to pay attention. Everyone's dragging their feet and saying, come back on your next deal or come back on Fund 3. And it can be pretty frustrating of an existence. So just to assure yourself that you are making progress, to assure your partners that you have more patience, maybe to manage a placement agent that you're working with so you have some transparency on what you're paying that retainer for every month. It's really important to have things that you're measuring. You can have it in a dashboard. I'm sure you can find software if you want to spend money on software for it. You can just use it in Excel and figure out what you want to improve over time, what leads to an investment. Everybody tracks how much you raise in your AUM, but tracking how many in-person meetings are you getting each month? How many inquiries are you getting that came from the website? How many public talks are you giving at local trust and estate events or local wealth management industry events, etc.? Could all be leading indicators to you raising more capital. It could be important things to be tracking over time. Edward Deming, who was famous for automobile manufacturing and efficiency, said that if you don't measure it, it's not going to get improved. It focuses your energy on improving it once you measure it. So it could be just producing some sort of value for your niche every Friday for 30 minutes. And you literally do that consistently in a focused way that over time would get you momentum. That would be one example of it. And I bring this up just because so many partnerships fall apart over frustration on this topic because it's challenging. Obviously, capital raising is a challenging thing to do. And we're gonna show a diagram of a process in a minute here for capital raising. And if you can diagram that process, it not only means that you know it, but you can explain it to others, and you can identify where the investor conversation is breaking down. If people get on the phone with you, they won't take the meeting, they take the meeting, but not the second meeting. And then you can identify numbers maybe that are going to help you get past that, or just seek help and focus your energy on getting past that bottleneck. So it'd be good to jot down a note or two on what you're going to start measuring. And we're going to keep pushing through the content, take the break, and get to the next exercise here. Just make sure we get through it all. But this is an example of how to focus on your unique ability. It's also an example of how to be more efficient and more effective. In that if you have a certain way of when you're traveling to San Diego to meet with investors, you might have a process of looking at CRM, who do I know in San Diego, who should I reach out to? You might send them an email. Maybe if they're important lead, you might also call them. And then you might send a follow-up email, and that might be your process. But you're doing too many steps of it. So it's taking more of your time, and it's not optimizing the process. So it'd be more effective if you would have someone else do the CRM export. They show it to you, you just cross off the ones that aren't a good fit. You then have an email that you write with the template, and it's just customized by company name, any little notes you want to have there for what your crystal clear advantage is. And then your team can send out the email, and they can have that email go out after they use a template direct mail letter, and they're more likely to respond to the email. And then you can space that out by 10, 12 days, do a phone call, and if you want to, then you can forward that old email another 10, 12, 15 days later, and say, hey, I just wanted to follow up. I'm going to be in town in 2 days, like I talked about. I'm meeting with 3 other family offices down the street. And I still have time at 11 a.m. if you'd like to meet on Thursday this week. And by doing that and having more steps to the process that increase conversion, but you're not executing as many steps as you were before, you're getting a better response rate. So people are more likely to respond to your email if they also got a voicemail from you, even if they don't really like to call back all their voicemails. They see the email, it's easier for them to just confirm the meeting via email typically. If they're a busy executive, then it would be a call back. And then also you could have them on an evergreen monthly newsletter, or you could have a resource sent out to them a few weeks later. And so this is really just talking about operational efficiency and having standard operating procedures. And once you have those, then you can push them down to a virtual assistant or an associate on your team. The 2 best books on this topic are Traction and Work the System by Sam Carpenter. And they're both excellent and different ways to make your operations more effective over time. This is something we're doing right now for a family office client who identified a niche type of company he wants to acquire. He bumped into 2 of them at an event. He said, well, I wish I could find more deal flow like that. Let me know if you hear of someone. I said, well, we can do better than that if we know who you're trying to go after. And we created a database. I had a data researcher, like a virtual assistant, research and found 58 companies that meet the criteria. She then found their websites, and then I told her to get the contact details for the CEO. She put those in an Excel database, wrote an email template, and now she's drafted the 58 emails for those CEOs. And when 5 to 10 of them reply, I'll get on the phone with them, and I'll figure out if I can create 2 to 4 opportunities for this family office. But the only thing I did was craft the architecture of how that should happen. I don't have to research them. I don't have to put them in the Excel. I don't have to write the email templates. You just have to do the part that can't be replaced, which is what your unique ability is, or the part where you show up in person and you're the live voice on the phone. But leveraging others to make things more effective and more efficient is something that I think is important that all of us could use. We have a library of 35 hours of webinars. It's free if you log into Charter membership. They go on for an hour in just on choke points. We've got a webinar on starting a family office. We have a webinar on 25 capital raising strategies. A lot of content, and anyone on your team can access this and benefit from the webinar, even if they don't want to come to a full live workshop. And if you're busy for a workshop coming up in Q1 or Q2 this year, and you want someone on your team to go, the membership can be used by any one person on your team. So even if you're too busy or you're not an appropriate person for a certain event, you can send someone else. I think we had a question over here. Yes.
Do you have a personal rule of thumb for how many reaches out to somebody with no response back is too much?
Yeah, that was a good question. Do you have a rule of thumb for how many times to reach out before it's too much? At Capital Con, we had someone that had raised hundreds of millions of dollars. He said he reached out one time. If the person doesn't respond, he moves on. And he doesn't care. He's done. I think the more you have it targeted in where your investment is very relevant and you know they should have some pre-interest in it, then the more energy you put into following up, the more local they are to you, the more they're all the way up one of those 3 trust curves, the more time I would put into it. But that pattern there for trying to get interaction within like Q1, for example, with somebody doing an email, direct mail, spaced out, phone call spaced out, and then one final email spaced out, 4 reach outs within 1 quarter is I think the maximum I would do. And it's always better conversion rate wise if it's about meeting in person and something that's personal, not just, hey, you want to get on the phone so I can pitch you my fund. Because then it's just about you pitching your terms and not getting to know them as much unless you're offering value. Yes.
Do you recommend any CRM packages?
Yes. Do I recommend any CRMs, which are like software for managing relationships? We recommend HubSpot, and we're an agency enterprise partner with them. So anyone who wants a free HubSpot account, let Jennifer know, and we'll get you, hooked up with one by Monday. And it auto tracks emails so that when you're emailing someone back and forth, it's recording it in the CRM. You don't have to go manually add notes there. So you can see the history of email interactions there. And we've used Infusionsoft and Salesforce and a decade ago Apt, and we think that HubSpot's the most user-friendly. It's pretty easy to set up. So what we were talking about before is tracking the right numbers. These numbers could be about raising capital or performance from members on your team, like key performance indicators. And just having a one-pager can be very helpful for managing the whole process. So we have the worksheet in your workbook. I think that was on page 6 or 7 this morning. It's at the back as well. If you complete that, that can be a good first step figuring out, for capital raising for your investment firm, what are the next steps you need to do? What are the goals that you need to get done and take action on right now? What are the choke points, et cetera? So you have it all organized in one place for your team. Part of the value of coming here, I hope, is going to be the networking. There's probably 25% more people here today who have raised $10, $20 million last year than there was in New York earlier this week, or in Chicago or Dallas earlier this month. So there's some people in here that have learned a lot about capital raising that you can learn from. And I hope you leave with 1 or 2 people here that you can have as an accountability partner, just a friend in the business, you can share tools with, strategies with, maybe a software tool you find, an event series you find, maybe deal flow you can't do anything with that would be a good fit, or an investor lead that you can't do anything with. You can get to know them over time in their business. It could be local to you or not. I went to an Evan Pagan event in 2009, 2010, and met someone named Jason, and I've been doing a weekly accountability partner call with him since then. For the past 9 years, we call each other every Tuesday and say what one thing you're going to get done over the next week, make sure it's aligned with your annual goal. And then that way, if you get on the phone the next week, you're kind of shamed if you haven't done anything on what you just told him you're going to do for the whole week. Not for the whole week, but the number one thing you're going to get done. And the reason I bring that up, or have this picture here, is I was in Nice, and my wife and I were here on the beach, and I went on a jog down the way here. It's 5 miles down the boardwalk and back. And when I was running, I noticed all these guys running faster than me with tags on their shirts. And just by chance, I was taking a run during the Nice Ironman race. And everybody had swam a mile and biked 75 miles. And now they're running a marathon, and they were still running faster than me. And the winners of these races get done in 7 or 8 hours. So the losers get cut off when it's dark outside. So it just tells you how hard of a race it is. And even so, or even though I thought I was in okay shape, you guys were all running faster, to me, you run a little bit faster. And that's the point, hopefully, of meeting some people here in the room that can just help you in implementing a little bit quicker, a little bit more conviction, an extra tool or two, extra feedback, advice, etc. All right, so here's the exercise that I referred to earlier. There should be handouts for this on your table or also in the workbook. And feel free to take the extra one home if you want to. This is the most complex exercise we're doing today, but it's not really tricky. It just helps bring together many ideas from the day. So this is going to be helpful in trying to figure out what is the best investment of your energy, tomorrow or next week or this month. So at the very start here is what you want to get done this quarter, or if you want to, you can make the time frame for the year. But for the quarter, what intellectual property and written materials do you want to get completed? For this quarter, how many new investor connections or investment firm connections do you want to make? What type of overall investment activity do you want to have happen? Do you want to close 6 deals or get your AUM up over $200 million, et cetera? For this part here, it's your anchor, what's slowing you down, what's holding you back. In the middle is what reoccurring thing or habit or system should you have in place so that you can be more effective raising capital, more effective with your investments. And if you put those things in place, it would just allow you to get these things done during the quarter. And then these are 4 different projects. They're going to help you meet your longer term annual goal. These could be from your choke point exercise. It could be, this one could be decide on investor avatar, get crystal clear one sentence done. Probably the sandbox one should go above those. So figuring those 3 things out could be it, or these could all be about thought leadership and defending your sandbox, or something totally different, like implement CRM. This would be at the end of the year, what do you want to have happen in terms of amount of revenue or investment raised. And then this would be accountability partners, team members, who's going to support you in getting all this done. So a quick example as you start to write it out for yourselves, if you already kind of get it here, is at the top, and I wrote getting the Centimillionaire version 3 book done, getting our investor relations advantage materials going, expanding the podcast. For number of connections, I put 1 new Centimillionaire family lead a week is what I want to have coming in. And I want to have 6,000 email opt-ins a month on the websites, sold out events, and then overall investment. I want to get 4 of those royalty deals done that I talked about earlier today. And then 2 $10 million debt deals done and reinvest in my team heavily. My number 1 anchor is just email load. I've gone through 3 assistants in 3 years, so I just need to get both of those things figured out so they're connected. In terms of habits and things that the influence workshop, we're going to talk about not only influence other people, but how to influence yourself, how to change how your own brain is perceiving what you want and what you want to get done. And I put one of the habits here is doing CrossFit, and then I stopped drinking coffee about 3 months ago and just do a green vegetable shake up every day. So they're 2 reoccurring things. There could be something else that you need to be doing, like number of phone calls or a process at the start of your day. Projects, I put Centimillionaire migraine book idea, getting my RIA registration paperwork in place, closing 180 million and $310 million clients that are about to close, and then figuring out the collaboration with the firm in LA. And our goal is to bring in 6 million revenue this year and 10 million long term in 2021. And then these are some of the accountability partners and groups that are supporting me. So if you can take a few minutes to write this out, it might take longer than the next 5-10 minutes to write this out, so I want to be thoughtful on it. And I know that. And it would make my job a lot easier if I said you have 30 minutes to do this and I could go, relax outside and sip water, but it's not going to give you as much value. So I just want you to start jotting down some notes for this and start completing it, and then we'll get back to the content. But let's take this 3:04 now, so just take the next 6 or 7 minutes just to write in some notes on what some of these items are, so that by the time that you leave the workshop today, there's 1 more page you can look back to on what you need to be implementing. And sometimes there's confusion on this exercise specifically. Up here it says intellectual property and written materials. Sometimes I get questions on that. Does anyone else have questions about the box up here and what it's for?
Leave your example up.
Okay, yeah, I'll leave that up there. let's do 5 more minutes on this and get started.
Okay.
You want to cook over here? It's probably just.
No, I'm fine. No. It's okay, either way, as long as I'm not bothering you.
Okay, we're gonna get started here. Probably about 30 seconds. Make sure we get through all the content.
Yeah.
All right, great. Let's keep moving. Does anyone have a quick question before we move forward? Yes.
Can you explain what you mean in overall investment? Because the first one is reinvest in team building. I get that. The other two, close 4 royalty deals, 2 $10 million deals. Those seem to be very different things. So is that either investment of time or
Investment activity. So for someone in self-storage, it might be close the deal on 8th Street and get due diligence done honestly, the 4 royalty deals is more of an annual goal, so it should have been less because it's supposed to be for this quarter, honestly. But that's what that is. Yeah.
All right, fair enough.
Yeah. And the reason we do these is I just want to de-risk walking away and not saying, oh, well, what do I need to do next, or what do I do first? So I want to make sure everyone has that in hand. So earlier today, I quickly referenced databases, and we've been in the database business. As some of you, that's how you found us, through familyofficedatabases.com. And the number one piece of advice I can give you on building your own database to use of local investor leads, or managing your own Rolodex, or using the third-party database, is that you need to use it to develop a genuine relationship. All of the thought leadership, the architecting your position, the use of databases, none of it really means anything unless you use it as a vehicle to meeting in person with people, or doing a video call and building a genuine relationship with them. Otherwise, it's just not going to become real, and you're not going to get them to move forward and become clients. So that's something often misunderstood. Also, I find it's interesting being in the business. We find sometimes people say, "Oh, well, send an email out to 30 people, but no one said yes to meeting with us." And we say, "Well, they're accurate, so it went to the real people, unless the email bounced. If it did, we'll replace it with a good contact. But we can't really control whether they reply to you. That's up to you to know your investor set, know your competitors, know your sandbox, etc. And it's an interesting dynamic to hear from people, but it helps using the workshop tools we have here today, obviously. Earlier, we had a question on CRM. We use HubSpot. We use Aweber for some email follow-ups. We have some email follow-ups designed as pre-written emails that are scripted, so that when somebody comes into a lead list, they'll get an email follow-up day 1, another email 10 days later, maybe one 20 days later, or 6 days later, and they're programmed and they're optimized emails you write one time, and somebody gets on a list, and then they're going to get that pre-written email automatically. They might download the capital raising book and then get an email an hour later or a day later. And in some of our business lines, we have 30 email follow-ups, and one of them we have 120 email follow-ups that go out. That could be a radio show interview, a podcast, a free book, an insight, and having those pre-scheduled can help with following up with prospects, even if it's just once a month piece of value. We use Facebook for remarketing and email targeting, and we're going to talk about that in a slide or two. We use Google Analytics to see our website analytics. We use the Google Keyword tool I talked about earlier today. I'm not going to go through all of these, but we had one member of the Family Office Club that was spending $30,000 a year on their phone systems. And, we use Vonage, it's $300 a month, so I'm sure most of you do. But if you're, hopefully one of these resources, or a couple of them, could be helpful to you. They're not using yet. And if you have questions on a specific type of tool that you're looking for and you want to ask now or after the event, I'm always happy to point out what we're using currently. Are there any questions on that?
Do you have a good WordPress guy?
Yeah. Louise on my team is just like WordPress,
But she probably won't
yeah.
create one for outside of your organization.
We do it through pitchdex.com, but if you have a problem with finding a certain plugin or a certain tool and you just need like a question answered on it, we're always answering questions for charter members, trying to be as helpful as we can. Yeah. So LinkedIn versus AdWords and Facebook. We use all three. LinkedIn, you're going to pay the most per click. AdWords, you use about the same, sometimes less. And then Facebook, you're going to spend the least amount per click. Importantly to know with Facebook, you can narrow it down to within a 1 mile radius of any address you choose. And so you can really carve out which households and which areas are seeing your ads. So where I live, half the island is condos and half are houses. And I can choose the address of a house that's over almost in the ocean and choose that address so that only the part of the island, which is the houses, get my Facebook ads and not the ones that live in the condos in case I think they're less qualified. You can target a conference that has lots of prospects for deal flow or investors and say they're meeting the Four Seasons here in San Francisco next Tuesday. Everyone's checking in on Monday evening. You can put a 1 mile marker around that and have it just turn on that Monday afternoon and turn it off on Wednesday or Thursday when everyone leaves the conference. And you can get exposure, especially if you know the gender and the age of your target demographic. You get exposure just to them, or to a dental association event, or a food expo in New York, or something of that nature. So there's ways to use this strategically and narrow it down. If you're on AdWords, it's via city, and on Facebook, it'd be into a 1 mile radius. But most importantly, for people who are in the room, they're just highly skeptical of using anything up here that I have shown. There's an idea for you, is taking your 500 leads, your 1,200 leads, and just uploading those to LinkedIn, or just uploading those to Facebook. They'll match what emails match in the account. And you could show your sponsored updates, or you could show your content just to people who you already know are an excellent lead, because you've already met them in person. And that can be a way to de-risk your spend and not spend very much and go deeper with the target audience. You can also create lookalike audiences. So you say, here are 200 past investors. Tell me, using deep data, other prospects that look just like this. And you can also do things like put a little 1 line of code in your website and then tell Facebook, show my 7 educational videos only to people that have been to my website in the past 90 days. And that way you're just remarketing back to the same people that you already attracted through Google or through a meeting, or they got your business card, etc. Those are really low cost ways of going about it. Yes?
Is that what you mean by purge and laser focus your connections?
No,
Or are you talking about just generally speaking, purge the crap that's...
Yeah. I mean, generally speaking, and very specifically with LinkedIn, because you're capped at 30,000 connections. And Facebook, I think it's 5,000 or 6,000 connections, but LinkedIn's more productive for making a lot of relevant connections. But then over time, like I have an assistant who accepts connections for me, and they have general rules. Don't accept unless they're in a certain industry or job title or area. And before I got to the cap on number of connections, but 10,000 of them were not as valuable as the other 20,000. So we disconnected those so I could accept, a couple thousand more that were investment management industry or family office related. And then when you put out sponsored content, just be a little post or a quote or a link to something interesting or a picture of an event that you spoke at, then your connections are more likely to see it. And LinkedIn allows you to upload videos, and the videos get pushed pretty well to your native audience who's following you or your company page. So that's what that comment was about. Yep. And I started with just spending $300 a month and getting a positive ROI on a campaign, and then started another campaign, and then just kept on trying. And when one failed, I drop it, and then start another one. So we've grown it by getting an ROI each month, and then keeping the ones that work and stopping the ones that don't. And I've only read one book on this topic. It's by Perry Marshall. It's his Google AdWords strategy book. And the mindset he gives you in getting AdWords right can be carried over to Facebook and LinkedIn and competing ads against each other and just being really smart with your money on doing this. This is how, if you choose the right sandbox and you architect a position, you can push leads into the top of your funnel or different points of your funnel. This is how you fill the funnel after you've constructed it. If you build a sandbox, you build a funnel, and nobody's participating in the funnel, it only helps you when you get in a live meeting. Still helps you, but the better benefit is to get people into the top of the funnel who are well qualified. And you can target individuals by job title or by demographic, and you can exclude people based on demographic or age or gender, etc. And so getting this dialed into your investor avatar is really important. That's why I said earlier, if you don't analyze the marketplace, or you choose the wrong investor avatar, or you don't have one, you won't know who to put in your funnel, and it's not going to be targeted. But if you targeted people who were dentists, and you got lists of members within dental associations, you got lists of the top largest dental businesses, and you went to dental events, and then you targeted them and retargeted them, it'd be a pretty niche campaign. It doesn't have to be very expensive. You could have kind of an omnipresence within the mind of some of your prospects. So the idea is to be everywhere for a very specific sliver of someone, because it's more valuable for us and more practical not to try to be the, like people like Oprah or Jay Leno had his big TV following. We're trying to just attract people not for mass eyeballs, but for niche qualified leads coming in. And that's what we're really trying to go for, is not trying to be everywhere for everyone, but everywhere for very specific someone. I think there's a question. Yes.
Yeah, so what's the name of the book again? It was AdWords Strategy.
Yeah, I think it's called Google AdWords Strategies by Perry Marshall. It's the one that's got hundreds of reviews and very highly rated on Amazon. Yes.
When you talk about niche within a niche, you talk about fine tuning that, like the dentist campaign you were talking about.
Right.
Are these specific campaigns so you can have multiple niche within a niche campaigns?
You could, but it'd be helpful if it was layered within the same sandbox. You're carving off an ever more valuable or an adjacent one. So You might go after dentists and realize the most valuable dentists are the surgeon dentists. And so you might not abandon the dentist progress you made, but put the most proactive energy into the surgeons in the dentist space, and the periodontists, and the facial surgeons, and reconstructive jaw surgeons, etc. Just like you might target physicians and figure out surgeons and figure out cosmetic surgeons. Or like I did family offices and single family offices and how to start a family office, and adjacent to that, the centimillionaire $100 million net worth families. So I don't abandon what's working at the macro, but you just go more micro, as you learn more about the niche, and you find more gaps in the marketplace where no one else is taking that turf, and it's right adjacent or connected to or part of the turf you're already on. Then you can dial it in further to get a better ROI.
But that's only one of potentially multiple campaigns, right?
Yeah, for sure, it could be.
Okay.
Yeah. In our business, we try to be more valuable to those raising capital by representing the investors, and more valuable to the investors by having access to a lot of deal flow through capitalraising.com and capital raising workshops. So they both help feed each other on both sides of the fence. It makes it more productive. So for us, we have campaigns on both sides. And for many of you, you'll have your operating business, you'll have a campaign to attract customers, and then a campaign to attract investors perhaps, or a campaign to attract a deal flow, and a campaign to attract potential investors. Sometimes it might overlap, like if you had, I had an example I didn't use on choke points of healthcareinvestmentbanking.com, that might attract to you mostly deal flow, people looking for a healthcare investment banker. But someone might see that who's an investor or who already had their exit and stumble across that or hear about you and your expertise and realize you might have great deal flow and become an investor because of that positioning you have. Any other questions on this slide before I move on? One thing I've learned the hard way is just to focus geographically. Otherwise, a lead might call you from Kentucky that could be a good lead, and the first phone call could go decently well, and now you have to fly to Kentucky to really figure out if it's worth pursuing. It's better off to really do well in your own backyard before trying to go national or international. This is especially true for international because the time to travel to follow up with an investor, if you're not going there at least quarterly, you just look like a business tourist and you're not going to be taken too seriously in places like Singapore or Hong Kong or China. You really need to be developing a real relationship in person. So I think this can be a cost savings, and for most people, they'd be better off focusing primarily in one city, and then maybe have a secondary or third they could fly to same day, like a commuter flight to San Diego or LA, but maybe spending most of your time in one place, so you can really go deep and have less spend until you get an ROI, and then expand from there. Some local strategies for generating investor leads. One is to find the top 3 to 5 communities. I've found some that work and some that don't work. The communities could be yacht club, golf club, Porsche club, sort of driving racing club. Like one of my friends is he was paid $34,000 to go to a racetrack and do a 24-hour race where the Porsche is all ready to go with the racing seats in there and everything. He doesn't have to maintain a car; it just shows up and does the race. Figuring out communities that are part of your background or just have pre-qualified prospects or people that advise your prospects. And you'll probably always be finding 1 or 2 of these who are a complete waste of your time and then holding on to the 2 or 3 that are really productive. Also being located in the right place, your office in the right place, living in the right place. When I was in Oregon, I met just 3 family offices, and I was there for 6 years running the family office club. And in Key Biscayne, I had 3 family offices in my 4-year-old's barbecue in my backyard because they're in the preschool class with her. You don't even have to try in South Florida. In some places, you'll meet more at the swing set pushing your kid than you would if you were in Oregon trying to find them, because there's just so many more of them. And that was one of the decisions that when we moved, warm weather and low taxes in a family office friendly location, and we had looked, we had a lease in hand for a waterfront place in Boca, or we could try a year in Key Biscayne. And Key Biscayne was almost 50% more expensive. But we just thought, like in Oregon, you're never getting an ROI off of that cost of mortgage or rent. But if we played our cards right to go into a place we'd really enjoy and was like health minded, everyone's always outside, you know, all your neighbors, because you walk your kid to school, you walk to work, etc., that there could be an investment ROI of the mortgage or rent actually producing relationships, producing deal flow, producing clients that just you wouldn't have that upside if you were in a place that was mediocre or not effective. So it actually makes it so that it's not a cost, it's a profitable thing to be living in a very nice place. And so I think it's an interesting way to look at it, because usually it's not an investment in terms of the location. location. And it's best with the local community if you can line it up with the passion. Obviously, don't do the Porsche Club if you hate driving fast, or golf bores you. You can find something you genuinely enjoy, so that you'll just naturally make friends and find business people you can get to know over time. Using keyword focused content. If you figure out a gap in your local market, like nobody's the number one person known for estate planning in the local market, or there is no multifamily office that's well known here in Baltimore or in the suburb of Carlsbad or wherever you're based at. Those can be things to look for to build your presence so people know who to refer business to locally. And then figuring out just one or two of these things that you can do short term, making sure you're doing at least 2 or 3 of them, because most people are not going to consistently be part of more than 1 or 2 groups strategically, and almost no one builds the funnel or puts social media behind it to actually fill it. So just doing a couple of these things at a basic level and putting them in motion is what's going to create the opportunity to be first in mind, top of mind, and be referred people for that very specific thing that you stand for. So it's a combination that makes it powerful, not just the one thing. All right, in this section, we're going to be talking about how, first of all, does anyone have questions on this? I went through it a little quickly. Yes?
Custom investor database.
Yeah, custom investor databases. So I know you came up with the break. You mind if I share your example? Okay. You said that you wanted to find individuals or family offices that would want to invest in insurance companies or the insurance industry, I think it was. And so we have this question come up a lot. And I think the best thing to do is to look at who's had exits in the space, who's on the boards of companies in the space, or who's running a company that's doing 50 million, 100 million of revenue in the space, and they're probably doing quite well. And if you find those that are all the way up that learning curve on the industry, it can be a good source of leads. In the insurance industry, there's been tons of acquisitions going on, a lot of boutique insurance firms being bought out by these big conglomerates. They're just buying practices left and right, and they'll put out press releases about that activity to kind of brag about what they've acquired. And if you hire somebody on Upwork.com to do 10 hours, 20 hours of research, check on them, then have to do another 50 or 100 hours of research on it, they might be able to build a database of 30 to 50 or 100 companies that had exits, and then figure out who the CEOs of those companies were. And then you can create a database of their contact details and try to find out how to get in touch with them. And if somebody has sold their company and their website is now taken down, it's been rolled into the insurance conglomerate, when that happens, you can use a website called a Wayback Machine. And if you know what their website URL was, you can look at the historical website and find their name, sometimes their contact details, etc. So I think just finding people who have had access to the space and know your space already is a good go-to kind of shortcut.
How much time does it take for the 100 hours to be done? Like how much cost?
You can hire individuals on Upwork.com for $3 to $10 an hour to do this type of research. And we've got 4 of them working for us full time, and we've got some part time, like a book editor person, etc. So you could hire 2 people and they could get it done in a week, or if they're busy, it might take them a month. Yes.
And what has your experience been with Upwork? Because that's one of the ones that you're starting to hear a lot about. But,
yeah, Upwork, we've used a ton. We've hired probably 90 people on there over the past 10 years, and like I said, 4 full time. We have a couple part time. Some are just for niche things. If something goes horribly wrong, before Luis joined our team, it was really technical programming type website problems. We have to use a niche expert on there for that, for example. But if something melts down, you can find someone there same day, hire them, get it fixed, and by dinner the problem's gone away because we access that brain, in kind of real time there. Yes.
You do need a very good local person. How do you structure your organization? Is that a franchise or a partner or your employee?
The question was, need a good local person. How do we structure our organization like a franchise or a partner? Right now, for lack of a more intelligent way to do it, we just do it ourselves and we don't partner. We have sponsors that pay us fee, grab an exhibit booth. We have some sponsors who want to be at all of our events. They just do like a retainer, and they get exposure and leads, consistently at our different events. But we don't license or franchise or anything at this point. Just because the whole reason we started this is we just found that the quality of the speakers and the quality of family office events that I was speaking at wasn't where it should be in terms of how many we're speaking on stage. So we are always learning things. Every time we do one of these events, we have 10 or 20 things we should do differently, the next time. And so we just think after doing that 105 times, it'd be hard to trust a partner to do it well enough. But eventually, maybe we'll figure that out. Maybe one more question? Yes.
So far, you talk about a lot about inbound marketing strategies.
Right.
How do we position ourselves? But how about outbound marketing strategies aside from coming to like your events?
Sure. Honestly, I've spent almost all my energy on the inbound. I've just found that when you reach out to somebody cold, they're very unlikely to respond. So I just found it not to be a good ROI to be cold calling people and cold emailing people. The only time you can is if they fit your investor avatar. You do a little bit of research on them to see if it's a good fit. They're most likely going to be attracted to what you have to offer them, or you have a way to add value to them first, a genuine way to make an introduction or a resource, etc. Or you're going to be in their city and you can summarize real quick the value you can provide and ask to meet in person. But I think most of the point of my presentation is a lot of people do outbound like sales work to raise capital, where I'm encouraging you to think about positioning so that when you do the outbound reaches, it's very specific and intentional on what you're communicating, but to focus on getting leads in through adding value to them first. So I've done the outbound sales role as a capital raiser, and I know how painful it is to call 30, 60 people a day, maybe talk to 3, put materials in the mail, follow up via email to all of them, almost no one replies. Like I've done that endlessly, it seems, and it just doesn't work very well. You know, so we get far more leads and traction by getting them to come inbound to us. My special skill set is not cold calling someone and convincing them, you know, Leonardo DiCaprio style, you know, to do the deal or something. It's not like my personality or skill set. But I know there's people out there who are excellent at that. There's, you know, some people where that is their unique ability, but that's not me. So we don't teach it because that's not what works with families.
So in your experience, for your organization, the conversion is probably easier since the price tag is much lower, or there's much less due diligence and commitments compared to like investing in a round or within the fund.
Well, we just got verbal commitment 2 days ago when I was at the airport after the New York event from a $180 million family that just had to buy a private jet at Christmas to be able to get the write-off in time for 2018. And he is committing to a $300,000 fee to have his family office set up and managed, and then upside on getting debt in place on his portfolio of assets. And that's been something that, you know, I did a 6-hour phone call the day after Christmas on top of the mountain. They did an in-person meeting a couple months ago. He came to our family office dinner. He came to my office 12 months ago to meet and talk about it. He came to my event before that once or twice. And before that, he was on my email list. So I think that's a relatively long sale. It's not closed yet. And he's going to be trusting me and my strategic partner for implementing and running his family office. So I think that's probably as long of a sales cycle as most people here in the room. And the other one that's moving faster is a $300 million family reached out cold in September, October. We had a phone call in the fall, and then in person in late November. We've now had 2 more in-person meetings, and it should close, I think, in March, early March. So that one's a little bit longer as well. So I think I do have the same, you know, patient game experience that a lot of you are having to have as well. That's what the Centimillionaire book is for, the How to Start a Family Office book for. Does that answer your question a little bit? About,
yes, that's very helpful. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Anyone else have a question before I move on? Okay, so it's 3:34. We're going to try to get done right at 4 so we can enjoy cocktails, and some of you have to leave for a flight or a train, etc. to get out of here, so we'll try to get it done just on time. This last stage on iteration is here because no matter how well you know your space, how well you've dialed into your sandbox, your investor avatar, even if it works magically well, you're always going to have an intuition and an insight that maybe it shouldn't just be surgeons, it should be cosmetic surgeons. Maybe it shouldn't just be dentists that own their own practice with 3 or more locations. Or it's not just those that have exited their business, they need to have exited it in our region, in our industry, or something of that nature. Or it just didn't work at all, so you need to tweak something. And so there's never going to be one approach that's right, and listening to that is important, and figuring out what unique game you want to play, whether you're a family office looking to run your portfolio more effectively, or someone raising capital. I think the trick is to figure out what are the rules of the game that you want to be executing on that's unique from everybody else. So you're not looking at the same deals in the same way, and you're not looking at investors and communicating with them like everybody else. So a couple of the slides from this section are going to be things that I see my family office clients doing, and that's how they created all their wealth, or it's what they're doing now that the wealth creation event has already happened. And the first one is from a family that owns the Mall of America, and they have a street sweeper business they bought that was going into bankruptcy. They like distressed assets, and their unique ability, the CIO's unique ability, is due diligence on distressed businesses and figuring out what the real value is. He found they had more patents than any other street sweeper company globally. So they acquired it, they were able to revive it, make it profitable. They then, from that experience and the value of having that IP, were able to buy a garbage truck manufacturing company and tack that on. And now when they call a county, they can sell them either one. They're usually on a quarterly or biannual ordering process for some of those devices. So that's an example of a niche monopoly area. Street sweeper intellectual property is very niche, but if they have the most globally on that, they can license it. If they needed to, they could go after the violating their IP, or they could sell the business after they've gotten it profitable, and they have that selling point to the IP there as an extra point. Another example is operating within the business. This here is a picture of a natural gas pipeline. And so if you are an oil and gas investment firm, if you're also operating a maintenance company for an oil and gas pipeline, or you have some sort of service related to installing new pipelines, et cetera, it's going to give you extra insight. You're going to see who's spending money in the space. You're going to know who's going high quality versus not. If you're a maintenance company and you know kind of the budget provider in the space, and somebody switches from the high-end provider to the budget one, you might know that they're preparing for a sale, or that they're kind of on the rocks and in trouble. But the point is that when you operate within the business and not just invest in it, you can have additional insights that others don't have, and sometimes it can reduce their costs as well. So an example of that is a commercial real estate group that has spoken at our events, and they only buy office parks within half a square mile of Times Square. And it's the most competitive space on planet Earth for office parks, yet almost no one's playing that game. Everyone who invests there, they also buy office parks in Tokyo and London and all the other tier 1 cities globally, or in the US like San Francisco. And because of that focus just on New York, they can go deeper on seeing the asset the same day. They can go and know how to value it faster. Everyone knows if they need to sell something quickly and quietly, who the group is that does nothing else but buy those office parks. They know the first name, the people who own them. So they have a distinct advantage because of that focus, but also they operate within the business. They do maintenance and management, property management of companies. They also do leasing and brokerage, but only in that space that's relevant to them. So they know when lease rates are going down and getting soft. They know who's not going to renew a lease before sometimes the owner of their own building does, that the tenant's in, because that tenant wants to quietly shop and see if they can get a better lease rate 4 streets over or 10 streets up. They don't want to tell the landlord yet before they negotiate that. So they might have better information than even the owner of the asset. So they might know the true valuation of an asset even better than the current owner. That's an example of normally on the P&L, the maintenance would be a line item at cost. But for this investment firm, it's a line item of profit, and they have additional insight, and they might get extra deal flow from knowing when a property is going to go on the market faster. So that's a good example of kind of vertical integration when it comes to family offices and propelling wealth. And the unfair advantage comes from that laser focus, even in the most competitive real estate market on planet Earth. So whatever industry you're in, the high-end space, even if it seems taken, maybe a more laser focus can make it so that you can still compete well, because you're just taking a focus that's even more narrow than anyone else. In short, a lot of the families are just playing a more complex game. Some of the families' game might look like a chessboard, but importantly, each one will have different types of strategies and different movements on the board and different pieces that act in different ways. And what I thought was interesting is that many of them don't look at it as, oh, we're in the business of X and all we do is X. All we do is sell street sweepers. They don't say, oh, all we do is run family office conferences. What was interesting is that early on, as our business grew to 7 figures, and we're thinking about how else we should be working in the family office industry, is that some people give me advice, well, don't do anything else. You're supposed to just do one thing and only do that. But what was interesting is family offices never told me that. When I met with them, they would say, you're only running the family office conferences? Like, what's your real game here? Like, that's worth doing by itself, right? I mean, you have to have some smarter idea of what you're doing with all these people getting together, right? And they would almost assume, it'd almost be like insulting almost if I didn't have an answer to that question. So it's like their brain worked the opposite because they knew that there's oftentimes businesses within a business, and one business can be a self-liquidating lead generator for another business. Just like the Family Office Club and our investor summits, some of those individuals might want to start a family office. So the business of running the events makes money, but we also have byproducts of deal flow and family office relationships, and some of those want help in getting started. Kevin Harrington was on Shark Tank the first year, and he invented the infomercial on TV. And he says that in his hyper-competitive space where millions of eyeballs are going on his products, people are always trying to compete with him and come into his sandbox. So he is an extreme example of, if you're in a competitive space, how you need to think about, if you really feel high conviction on it, how do you defend that against other people coming in? So he'll buy domain name misspellings, he'll start a second company in the same sandbox, but have it when people reach out that they'll get redirected and told that's part of the sister company of the brand, or he'll just get leads coming in there, or acquire the only other one that's in a small space so that they can do the advertising and know the leads are coming back to them, because he wants it to look saturated to others who want to come in and be part of that sandbox and kind of leech off of the work he's done getting exposure for things. And I think that, does anyone have questions about this slide and the purpose behind it, or how to interpret it for what you're doing? Protection for IP. Not directly, I didn't mention it, but definitely it's an important thing. I think that's intellectual property in terms of violating, trademarks and stuff. I think is what Kevin's somewhat afraid of globally. Trying to defend that can be pretty complex and expensive. Is that what you're asking about? In part? No. All right, so just a few more slides here before we get to the cocktail break. And like I said earlier, one of the most important things is just to integrate these pieces. It's better to implement just 5 things and have them be aligned, or even just 2 things aligned, rather than implement a whole lot of things, but you're not focused on one area or one end goal. And that's what the 5-step system is all about. Dan Kennedy is a copywriter, trainer, and he trains a lot of business owners how to grow their business. And he says the most dangerous number in business is 1. Because if you have one way of generating investor relationships, like a title insurance firm, if they only have that one referral insurance partner, then the whole business could go down overnight. They might be stuck with this balloon payroll. So finding other banks and replicating that strategy, or figuring out how to lock in those banks for the longer term, might be important. Just like with you, you don't want to raise capital through one placement agent or through one association or one networking group, because it'll just be an unstable position. And just like with this workshop, I don't want to provide you with just one idea that might be not the best idea for where you're at right now. So we provide a lot of different ideas, and the goal is to help you develop a holistic way to raise capital. So figuring out what communities you should be part of, the 3 to 5 communities, figuring out a strong position for yourself, figuring out how to be more effective and efficient at reaching out, using others who are only doing your unique ability when proactively setting up these meetings, taking the meetings, being more effective at converting people during the meetings, acquiring strategic choke points within the space, or operating a business within your space. There could be, if we wanted to, we could have 20 different prongs in this diagram. The point is that these 5 buckets are really comprehensive, all in areas you should consider. The point is that it should be multi-pronged, and there should be several different things that you want to put into place that in combination makes it so nobody else who's doing private equity investments into stem cells or self-storage in the San Francisco Bay Area is doing even more than one of these things, most likely. And if you define your sandbox right and you implement a few of these strategies, that's what's going to help you stand out. Peter Thiel, very well known, especially in this city. And he's got a book called 0 to 1. If you haven't read, it's one of my favorite books. Each chapter has about the same amount of insights as usually a whole book does. And one insight he has in there, when trying to figure out where to invest your energy and time, is thinking about what you think is a inevitable that everybody else is ignoring. And he says if you have the courage and the conviction to place an investment on that, then you can predict the future. He says that's how he has predicted the future, is by seeing what's coming down the line. And everyone seems to be ignoring, or they're worried about when it's going to happen, but he just has high conviction it will happen. And he was just in the news recently for his investment in Canopy. Whether you agree with the whole cannabis trend or not, he had good timing in putting, I think it was 75 million to work, and it was hundreds of millions he got back out. I think it was 600 million on the initial return he got on that investment. And so I think the point of bringing that up here is that your business partner or your spouse or your investment associate might not get everything that you're saying about where you want to focus, what investor set is best, and what sandbox you want to dominate. And there's a Harvard Business Review article saying, should you trust your gut? And the conclusion of the article was it depends on what your gut is made out of. And if you have a lot of experience in your space and you know it, you're through that maturity, like Ken Wilber model of going through adolescence and maturity, and you know your space very well, and you know a trend is coming, that even if no one on your team or your whole life agrees with you, then that's where you should double down and put your stake in the ground and try to establish yourself. Because sometimes when running your own firm, it's going to be impossible to get consensus, and that's where the most valuable ideas are. The fact that there is no consensus is why it's not obvious, which is what creates the massive wealth creation. Like David on stage at our Super Summit invested in Bitcoin back in 2012, and he describes himself as a total tech nerd. And he said that going into that back then when no one believed in it, was hard, but it's an example of this. It's you get rewarded for having the courage to do it before it's obvious, basically. All right, and this slide is a summary slide of some of the things we covered for today. And since we're 13 minutes away from being done for the day, I'm just going to go through a couple of these points real quick. And then if you can start thinking about maybe one thing you got out of the workshop today that you don't see here, or how you're interpreting one of these things, if you can get 5 or 6 examples maybe from the audience, something else that you got out of the event today. The first one is to have a crystal clear one-liner and just go through 20, 30 versions of that at least to get it dialed in. Next one is having choke points. You get strategic momentum on reaching your sandbox so that competitors who want to be in your same space soon will see that you have it very well secured for yourself, or that you'll just get, it doesn't matter if 2 other people join you. So you've got the leads coming in very consistently. The third is develop your investor avatar and make sure you know who you're trying to reach out to. And in the morning, when I first say that, it's not as obvious, but now after you've seen all the content, you can see it's a lot harder to use social media. It's a lot harder to architect accurately and figure out what's going to be the best ROI in your time, or who's going to be up one of those 3 trust curves if you don't have that investor avatar. Doing holistic investor relationship development, identifying your sandbox to dominate, constructing your position, using your DNA and background, not just a brand new idea, and being the #1 in your sandbox, that you are #1 and top of mind for a very specific investor set. They think that you're everywhere, and they think of you first. Anytime somebody brings up that keyword phrase that you want to own, they know you because you seem to be everywhere they are. And that's something that I took from Gary Vaynerchuk and how he does his video marketing, because he effectively has the equivalent of a network television station via Facebook now, but he's only targeting business owners, entrepreneurs, people that want to start a business, and he's able to drip a constant flow of video insights to his audience that have all been to his website, clicked on something, downloaded something. And I saw that and realized that that is the new television station, essentially, but with a much better ROI. And so we got together about 60 different YouTube videos and little insight quotes, etc. And we have those on Facebook, going to people who have been to the website or on a certain email list or have interacted with our brand in some way. And just on that Facebook campaign, doing remarketing, as of today, we've had 43,993 clicks for $1.33 per click on average. And those clicks go from Facebook back to bringing people to familyoffices.com. And so the being everywhere for, being like omnipresent for one specific avatar is really effective, and it does work well. And even if you only have 5 pieces of thought leadership, getting the targeting dialed in can be very helpful. And there's a lot of different ways to implement what we talked about today. Yes?
Could you just say that name again?
Yeah, Gary Vaynerchuk. And
You say Gary Vee, he'll pop up.
yeah, Gary Vee. He's out there a lot. Grant Cardone spoke at our Super Summit this year. I think he spoke last year or the year before as well. And he's local to me there in Miami, so I've got to know him over the past couple of years. And he uses our funnel to raise capital for real estate. And his goal is to raise $50 million in the next quarter and $100 million in the next 12 months using just social media. So he's an example of someone that is very prevalent on there, and he has a very broad focus. He does huge live events, and so his ability to dial things in like Gary Vaynerchuk in a broad marketplace is pretty unique, but it's also very expensive. So doing it in a narrow spot is going to be the best way to get started and get traction, and not going broad. That's how you lose money, I think, on social media and advertising in general. So these are 7 things that obviously we talked about throughout the day, came up several times. Are there 1 or 2 more insights or ideas that kind of came up through small group discussions, or that you want to share that you got out of the presentation today with other people here in the audience? For example, the first one on Monday in New York was that it wasn't just one thing, it's just there were so many different things to do, but if you do it in context of each other, that I haven't talked about integrity or integration that whole day. He said the most important thing, it seems like, is just tying all these 15 different things together. And usually I do talk about the integration piece, so I'm glad he brought that up, and so I did today more. Yes?
You want to be niche and famous.
You want to be niche and famous. That's good. That sums up some of it. I mean, part of it is there's a lot of rocket scientists, but the most well-known rocket scientist is going to get hired the most for the engineering jobs, probably. Yes?
So I think the choke points is important, because I think a lot of us maybe do that without knowing it was something that's called choke points. But I think acquiring potential competitors is something we do, but acquiring things that could lead into that or take away something that could come back and bite you later is something we do, but I don't think it's been called that before. So I think I'm going to use that now as a way to go after those kind of competitors, shall we say, potential competitors.
Sure, yeah. Comments about choke points, just like securing more of those and the power of that, like your example of the blog earlier, right? Maybe there's 2 or 3 others that are continuing to grow as well. You can lock those down before someone else does.
I'll do that tomorrow morning.
And the best part about choke points is that that's what I use to grow the family office club before I had $1 to invest in anything. And that's what got me momentum. So that's why I like talking about it. Yes?
The doctor approach was a really useful frame, so I'm going to add a slide to our deck, framing it around the doctor approach.
Great. The doctor approach. Yeah, at the influence workshop, we have a couple slides just talking about the art of listening and how you're so much more influential if you listen. And Stephen Covey says to be influential, you have to first be influenceable. And he always says seek first to understand in his books. And I think that you influence more once you understand more. Then you just talk about what the person actually cares about, and then they respect what you say more if it's more of a prescription. Yes. Any last 1 or 2 before I move on? Yes, in the back. Yeah, when you're soliciting investors, are there any security laws to think about? For sure there are. Depending on your jurisdiction, there's a lot of things to think about. Some things to be careful about is like generally, unless you fall under an exclusion, then you generally have to be licensed to raise capital for somebody else's deal or sometimes your own deals. You might have to be licensed through a broker-dealer. You know, if you're a wealth advisor, you usually have to have the RIA in place unless it's your own family members. But even if you think you for sure don't need licensing and you don't fall under regulations, it's always good to check with 2 different attorneys to make sure you get a real answer on what you should be doing and just err on the more careful side, because if you're taking this to a long-term approach, you want to do it the right way, obviously, from step 1. Another question? Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, the 506C exempt security, or so that you can, general solicitation filing you can do. So there's some new laws that didn't exist just 3-4 years ago. We presented this content before, where if you qualify for it and if you register at the SEC and follow the requirements for tracking and using verifyinvestor.com or some other service to make sure your investors are accredited, then you're able to generally solicit. And if you wanted to, in theory, again, talk to a compliance attorney, but I know many people who have done this. If you wanted to, you could advertise on Google or on a billboard or talk to a room that's not verified all accredited investors and hard pitch your deal if you wanted to, using, if you're filed, if you do it the right way, obviously with the SEC, and that wasn't possible even just a few years ago. And that is a perfect example of expediting the inevitable. In the future, a lot of more investment firms are going to be using that, but hardly anyone is now. And so figuring that out is just like figuring out the family office space. You're early on a trend, and you're going to be rewarded for that. You can figure out a process that works. So I'm glad you brought that up. Any one last comment before I move on? Okay. Speed of implementation is one of our company's core values. Our number one value is ruthless integrity. It's on a metal sign in 4 different places in our office. But speed of implementation is number 3 or 4 on that list. And it's up there because I found that when you work on something and you implement it, you get market feedback, it gives you clues to what to do next. And then you might put out 3 videos, and one of them really gets traction. You put out more content on that. Or you give a public talk, and nobody comes up to talk afterwards. It's meaningful. You give another talk to a different group, and it might be the exact same talk and a different group. You just found the audience was much more qualified. Or your different title, even though the delivery is the same, attracted different people to your workshop or your dinner. So implementing what you know and then getting market feedback and then growing from there is what can lead to fast growth. And I got this from an event I went to where everybody speaking was a $30 million a year or higher business owner, and they all talked about one thing only. After giving like a couple hours of a talk each, is speed implementation. So I started looking for information on it, studying it, thinking about it. An example of how it works is that when I was raising capital, we were trying to access wealth advisors that had accredited investors, and it was hard to get access to them. But we went to RIA, broker-dealer, wealth management networks that had many wealth advisors on their platform. And by providing white papers that other people had written before I had ever written a word of stuff for myself, we were able to get access to a list of contact details for wealth advisors because the RIA platform wanted their advisors to get out of just doing variable annuities and go into SMAs and hedge funds more in 2006, 2007. So by having other people's educational materials, it got me access and contact details and helped me raise capital, and it showed me the power of it before I even realized it. And I wouldn't have known that if I didn't take the research and the time to get together the research, try to set up those meetings and get the feedback. And it's similar to some of the stuff we talked about here today. If you try some of these things, you'll see what works and be able to iterate and implement further. Same with our first book that we wrote, getting our certification program launched, getting the first Wiley book deal, and things took off from there. And I had a workshop at the Harvard Club with an investment banker, friend who's an investment banker that sponsored all of our events in 2011 or 12. And I always talk about speed of implementation as one of my final slides. And I mentioned, oh yeah, one day I'll write a little book on this just so I can require my team to read it and really get it. And he kind of called me on it after hearing me say that 5 or 6 times at different workshops and said, well, if you're really going to write up the book, if you believe in the concept, why don't you just write the book tonight? I've been hearing you talk about this all year. And I kind of laughed, but I was too tired to really respond. I left and got on my red-eye flight back to Oregon. And on the flight, I had a cup of coffee, started doing the outline, I had another cup of coffee, started writing the book. And when I landed in Oregon, I had the book written on speed of implementation, not to sell to anyone. We just give it to some people in the workshops. I give it to my team. They read it when they onboard with us. And it's just made us such a return in the business that it's led to us learning a lot of things we wouldn't have if we tried to get it perfect. Dan Sullivan says that 80% is getting results, while 100% is still getting ready. So if you're trying to make it perfect, then you're never going to get started. You have to get it out there, and you'll get to a really high quality level faster by getting market feedback, rather than just keep it internal. It's all in your brain, and you're not seeing if people even care, or if they love it, or if they're offended by it, or not, etc. So that's how you learn, by getting stuff out there all the time. So when I started into the day, or the start of the day, I showed you these 24 events coming out. The idea is that you can come to at least one a quarter, we hope. If you want to, you can come to many more. It's any and all 4-year subscription. And but we find that if you come to at least 2, maybe 3 investor summits per year, like the Super Summit in Miami, it's a big 1,000-person plus event, 75 to 100 speakers. The local San Francisco Deal Flow Summit that we're going to be having here, maybe our Dallas or Chicago investor summits, and then come to Investor Influence, hopefully one time during the year, the Market Material Mastery event we'll have here right in San Francisco. I hope that between you and your team, you can come to 4 to 6 of these events, hopefully, throughout the year. On talked about what this is already, but oftentimes people see it, they don't get it. And it's interesting that when people come in, they often value the investor summits as much, if not more, than anything else. But without the workshops, I feel like getting more leads without having refined all the pieces we talked about all day is not going to be as productive. I actually think it's just as valuable, if not more, to hear from all these experts as it does hearing from the investors. And this is about a 200-person event for us usually in New York. But our investor events in New York, it's usually 250 people or more sometimes. So I think eventually this might be one of our most popular ones. And I just want to make sure it's clear on what it is. Again, we have these 4 events in case you came in late this morning: Capital Raising Catalyst, Investor Influence and Persuasion, Market Material, kind of a deep dive workshop. These 2 on the bottom, twice per year. Catalyst workshops, half a dozen times a year or more. Capital Con once a year in the summer in New York each year. Things changing with our team. Just onboarded several new team members. We're expanding the podcast. We got our capital raising certification program launched last year. We have certification programs in private equity, capital raising, family offices, and investment banking. If anyone on your team or yourself would like to complete a certification, it doesn't cost anything. That's part of your membership as well. Most people don't even know about half the things that we have included in the membership. And if you log in, there'll be a tab called Maximize Your Membership. And out of the 20 things included, it's just 10 quick things. You can just choose 4 to take advantage of, perhaps for your team. And the number one thing is logging in, submitting your materials for the capital raising audit. So I'll personally do a 4 to 6 page analysis of it. It also costs nothing, and you get a one-on-one feedback, advice, and I'll know you at the next event because of that feedback. And those are the big important things happening this year. But every year we're adding more events in more locations. And we intend to add another city or 2 in California in 2020. And we'll be here in the city 3 times this year locally, so it should be easy to keep in touch and hopefully see some of you at a few of those events. We have a free scorecard, which out of 167 people from New York, 0 people did this week for whatever reason. I think by this point of the day, maybe you're just done writing anything down. But it's just at familyoffices.com. Well, I've got the link to it at the top there, familyoffices.com/score. But if you complete that, it'll tell you where you need the most work and where you're in good shape with a lot of the concepts we talked about today. So maybe by this point, you're familiar with that, but it can be a good analysis tool to go through. It takes 5 minutes. Again, it doesn't cost anything, just a quick tool to use. And that's it for the content today. The cocktails are going to be out and to your right. If you don't have login details yet from Jennifer for the portal, because you just signed up, you can actually see what your login details are using the formula on the front of the workbook at the bottom here, are the details. And Jennifer will be scheduling a walkthrough with you. So just in 5 minutes, she'll get on the phone, help you log into the portal, walk through, show you where to submit materials, how to use our platform, how to use it best, etc. And she'll be scheduling that walkthrough with you over the phone. We got one question here.
Quick question. How many family offices generally come to the single family office summit?
How many family offices come to the single family office summit? Usually it's 200 professionals in the room, and it's about 25-30% of the room are family offices. Might have 60 some in the room. But most importantly, we have 25 speaking on stage. I think 24 are single family offices and private investors. We have 1 multifamily office that have been on a long time that's speaking, but the rest are all SFOs giving the feedback on stage for what they're looking for. Yes?
Now, when those 25 speak, and obviously they're talking about their own first experience, I mean, are they expecting then at the end of the show them to be then pitched by everybody in the room, or how does that?
Yeah,
is there limits to that, or what do you do?
Right.
I wouldn't show up again at that.
Yeah. So when an investor's done speaking, what's expected afterwards? They get approached by everyone or pitched by everyone. I mean, we ask them very clearly on stage what they're looking for and not looking for. Some people are so busy networking and having coffee outside, they don't stay in a room to listen to the investors. And I really think it's a shame, because then you leave at the end of the day, you don't know what 3 or 4 are looking for exactly what you came to the event for. So it's better to stay and listen than network the whole day. That's for sure. Sometimes the investors get a little, mobbed as they get off the stage. Everyone wants to meet with them, but if it's too busy and you already know what they're looking for, that's the key piece of information. And you don't need to get the contact details from them. Any investor you want to meet with that was speaking on stage at our event, we can help get you their contact details. So it's good to shake their hand sometime during the day. See how we followed up. My name's John. Crystal clear, 1 sentence. Enjoyed your talk or enjoyed your thoughts. I think maybe we could work together. And I think they'll appreciate the respect of their time. You're not trying to go through a 9-minute sales pitch when obviously it's not the right place to do that. But you can put a face with a name, or the next day they'll say, or the next week, I was there and I saw you speak on stage, and this is how we could think we could work together, and be very specific about what they said that made you think that. I think that would be the most effective way. Some of the people get worried if they're not able to pitch the investor for 10 minutes right there at the event. But it's not one-on-one pitch meetings, which usually cost $15,000 to $30,000 to have set up for someone. I think we have one last question here. Yes.
Suppose the family office is very important for the family offices, but let's say so many small family offices are like short of staff. Do you do like outsourcing support?
Sure. The question was, do you do outsourcing support for family offices low on staff? Yes and no. We can help get talent on your team. If it's a solution provider, we can help bring a family office quality solution provider. Maybe we can just follow up after the event, and I can see what specifically you need help with, and I can address that directly. Yes.
As part of our membership, are there online resources that help us find our
The best resource would be to do the quiz, and then do the capital raising audit, and then I'll reply back with feedback on that. You can just say in the context description box, my number one issue is investor avatar. Here's my background. Here's what I've had traction so far. Here's our materials, and I can make sure and address any questions you put in that comments box for your capital raising audit. That'd be the best thing. There are a lot of resources we didn't talk about in the portal today to help with other areas, for sure. Yes?
Just briefly touch on the investor database, that would be more outgoing.
Yeah, it'd be for, if you're going to Chicago already, it'd help you get another 2 to 4 meetings set up, perhaps, if you're going to be in the city, or you have the plane ticket to visit an asset you want to acquire. FamilyOfficeDatabases.com, we've got a brochure out there with Jennifer. Daphne on my team, who's a gentleman, he's the individual who would be the best to coordinate with on our team to learn more about it. But it's the best use is when you're already going to a city, just to get a couple more meetings booked. Yeah. All right, last question, and then anyone else wants to ask questions directly, come on up, but go ahead.
When you talked about new GPs, you mentioned that some of them are already in structure, they would take the step to GP, be more custom in how they approach you. That's really interesting because I was thinking that newer managers. Could you talk a bit more about that and maybe
Sure. Yeah, I'll talk real quick about new managers doing a co-GP or an anchor relationship with someone. Essentially, a family office knows they're adding a lot of credibility. They're going to be allocating. They might agree to come in as 20% of your L team base on each deal if you only charge them performance fees. Or maybe as long as it meets some certain criteria, they can say yes or no. They might take a percentage of your deal, but they might want to be a co-GP. Usually they wouldn't earn money off of the rest of the capital you raise, but as a co-GP, they might get special benefits, or there might be a write-off benefit or a benefit of being able to bring in LPs just like you do to the deal, and they might be able to run part of the deal with you, and they might be responsible for raising half of the LP capital you need or something. But it depends on the family's background about what they want, but just being open-minded and having a few different paths to bring to the table for how to do something strategic, so they're in a different share class maybe, so if they invest $1 million or more, to reduce fees. If they're a small $50,000 investor, they might pay the standard fees. And I'm happy to talk more about you with that, or when you do the capital raising audit, I can go in more detail. All right, so I think we lost 8 minutes for a cocktail there, so I apologize if some of you are ready to get up. Let's go.